Millions now living will never die. By Joseph Franklin Rutherford. Published by the International Bible Students, now known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Prefatory. Judge J. F. Rutherford. Brooklyn, New York. Dear Sir. The advance proof pages of your brochure, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, which you kindly allowed me to read, have proved to be even more interesting than hoped for, and I embrace this early opportunity to express to you my sincere appreciation of the work. The admirable way in which you have marshaled the sayings of the Lord Jesus, of the apostles, and of the prophets of old, and supported them by abundant secular evidence, all going to show that a time would come when millions then living would never die, and that we are now living in that time, will inspire hope and confidence in the mind of every honest, truth-seeking reader. As the one who had the esteemed privilege of syndicating Pastor Russell's sermons in thousands of newspapers in many lands, I was naturally anxious to know how you would treat the prophecies so often referred to in Pastor Russell's sermons. I am glad, indeed, to note that you treat the major part of your evidence from the standpoint of fulfilled prophecy. For one, I am glad that you gathered such an array of evidence to substantiate your claims and to show the people, as a basis for the worthwhile hope, how they may live forever. It will not be necessary for anyone to consider your statement as a guess. Again thanking you and wishing you rich eternal blessings for your labor of love, I subscribe myself as yours in the best of bonds. G. C. Driscoll. Santa Monica, California, May 17, 1920. Millions now living will never die. The emphatic announcement that millions now living on earth will never die must seem presumptuous to many people, but when the evidence is carefully considered, I believe that almost every fair mind will concede that the conclusion is a reasonable one. For nearly 1900 years Christians have been looking forward to a time coming when life everlasting will be offered to all the peoples of earth. Their expectations and hopes have been based upon the combined testimony of the inspired prophets of old, from Moses to John, upon the testimony of Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of the living God, and upon the testimony of his inspired apostles. About 4,000 years ago God made a promise to Abraham in which he said that he would bless Abraham and through his seed all the families of the earth should be blessed. Not only did he make this promise, but he bound it with his oath, and St. Paul plainly tells us that these two things, God's word and oath, are unchangeable, and that his promises must be fulfilled. Based upon that oath-bound promise and subsequent like promises made to the offspring of Abraham, devout Jews of the world have since looked forward to the time coming when blessings of life and happiness eternal will be offered to mankind. Today the eyes of Orthodox Jews of earth are fixed upon Palestine. They are looking up and lifting up their heads, and the hope is springing into millions of hearts that the time is at hand for the regathering of the Jews to Palestine and the establishment there of a state or government of the Jews and for the Jews, according to the divine arrangement. Since the time of Abraham they have looked for the Messiah, but have not yet discerned who constitutes the Messiah. Life everlasting in a state of happiness is the greatest desire of all men. Whether men have faith or not in the divine promises, each one would be glad to know for a certainty that there was before him life everlasting in a happy state. In view of this strong desire, and of the cumulative evidence given by the holy men of old concerning such coming blessings, it seems strange that more people have not tried to inform themselves upon the subject. The reason, as assigned by the Apostle Paul, is that the god of this world, Satan, the invisible ruler of the present social order of things, hath blinded the minds of those who are perishing, lest the glorious glad tidings of Christ Jesus, who is the image of God, should shine into their hearts. 2 Corinthians, chapter 4 verse 4. Many men of ability in the past centuries have entered the Christian ministry. The great adversary, knowing their vulnerable points, has used others to flatter and cajole them and to turn their minds toward worldly things, and by far the greater number of these clergymen, yielding to the baneful and seductive influence of the adversary, have themselves turned away from the Bible, and have blindly led the people in the wrong direction. They seem to have lost sight entirely of the fact that God has a great plan which he is causing to work out in an orderly, majestic manner. But the hour has struck when the people shall know the truth, and they that know the truth shall be made free from the bondage of ignorance and superstition, and their minds shall be turned into the channels leading to unending joy. It is the purpose of the writer to try to turn the minds of the people to a careful and prayerful consideration of the divine promises. It is to be deeply regretted that the clergyman would oppose an effort to teach the people the Bible truths. Nevertheless, we find much opposition everywhere, and many clergymen will attempt to prevent the people from reading what is here written. We, therefore, assure the reader that we have no ulterior motive in putting out this message. It is not propaganda. There is no desire nor effort to induce the reader to join anything. The motive for this publication is wholly unselfish. The writer has but one desire, and that is to induce the people to read and rely upon the divine promises, and thus fix their hearts and minds in this hour of distress upon mankind, to comfort those that mourn and point them to a better day which is near at hand. We should have in mind that the great, all-wise Creator has been nor for more Titan 4,000 years dealing with certain people, preparatory to bringing to every man an opportunity for life everlasting. If he whose wisdom is perfect would devote so much time and energy to the outworking of a great plan, then surely it is worthy of the careful and painstaking examination and consideration of every man, without regard to his creed, religious training, or his political view. Since the days of Abraham, many men of unusual intellect not only have diligently studied the divine plan, but have devoted their lives to having a part in making it known to others. There were 24 holy prophets, whose messages are recorded in the Bible. All of these foretold a coming time of great blessings to the human race. Their utterances were not their own, but they spake as the Spirit of Jehovah moved upon them. It was impossible for a human mind to look down through the corridors of the ages and to foretell what the future would bring forth, but these various prophets, guided by the all-wise Creator who knew the end from the beginning, wrote and spake merely as the instruments of God. God never failed in one of his promises. He says, "For I am the Lord, I change not." Malachi, chapter 3 verse 6, there hath not failed one word of all his good promise. 1 Kings, chapter 8 verse 56. All students of the Bible agree that the time must come when every promise of Jehovah will be fulfilled. Jehovah does everything orderly and on time and exactly in his own due time, and not man's due time. One day with him is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day, and what might seem to man a long-deferred fulfillment of a promise would be to God only a question of a very brief space of time. All students of the Bible also agree that it has pleased Jehovah to divide the social order of things existing from the beginning of the world into epochs, which epochs we call worlds, and which the Lord speaks of as worlds, such a use of the word world meaning a social order of things existing within a given period of time. For nearly 19 centuries students of divine prophecy have expected and looked for the world to end, because Jesus taught it would end. Many Christian men, however, failing to recognize the distinction between the symbolic and literal phrases of the Bible, have been confused concerning the end of the world. For instance, the great John Calvin taught that upon the happening of that event Jesus, reappearing near the earth, would cause fire to be emitted from the clouds, setting the earth aflame and totally destroying it and everything on it. He, being a clergyman of great renown, was supposed to have based his conclusions upon a proper interpretation of the Bible, and great numbers believed his teaching, and for this reason, with fear and trepidation, many have looked forward to the ending of the world. Reason would lead us to the conclusion that Jehovah would not create a wonderful earth like this, permit man to bring it to a high state of cultivation in many places, and then completely destroy it. Such is wholly out of harmony with his character. Likewise such is wholly out of harmony with the plain teachings of his word, which says, "The earth abideth forever." Ecclesiastes, chapter 1 verse 4. For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it, he created it not in vain, he formed it to be inhabited. Isaiah, chapter 45 verse 18, when the Bible speaks of the world ending, it does not mean the literal earth, but it does refer to an epoch or dispensation of time during which a certain arrangement of things or social order exists. In proof of this, the scriptures disclose that there was a world which existed from the time of Eden until the great deluge, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. 2 Peter, chapter 3 verse 6. At the end of the flood a new world began, and the promise is made by the same scriptural writer that it shall end. The period of that world is from the flood until the coming of Messiah's kingdom, and his kingdom is to mark the beginning of another new world or new order of things. The first world, then, began with the creation of man and ended with the flood. At the time of the deluge began the second world, which the scriptures speak of as the present evil world, and God clearly foretold that the second world, or social order of things, visible and invisible, would pass away during a fiery time of trouble, and then would follow the world to come, the social order or arrangement of things. St. Paul instructs us to rightly divide the word of truth, and this means, amongst other things, to apply the texts of scriptures within the period or epoch to which they belong, and applying these in their proper place, one can discern the orderly and majestic forward movement of the divine arrangement. All students of the Bible further agree that just before Jesus was crucified he told his disciples that he was going away, but that he would return again and receive them unto himself, and that his second coming would mark the end of the world, that is to say, the social order of things existing at the time he was on the earth. Other scriptures show that at that time the great blessing long promised, viz., life, liberty and happiness, would be offered to the entire human family. All students of divine prophecy agree that the promises of God made through the prophets must have a fulfillment sometime, and that the time for fulfillment relating to the restoration of the human race to life, liberty and happiness has its beginning at the end of this world and at the beginning of the new world, that is to say, at the time when the social order of things existing in Jesus' day shall pass away and the new order be established. By faith the prophets of old looked for that time and hailed its coming as the golden age, because during that age the Messiah shall reign and establish righteousness in the earth. It must be conceded, then, by all that the first important question for our determination is, when does this world end? If we can definitely fix this period, then it is an easy matter to determine when the divine promises with reference to life everlasting will be opened to the world in general. We therefore propose to prove in this argument that the social order of things, the second world, legally ended in 1914, and since that time has been and is passing away, that the new order of things is coming in to take its place, that within a definite period of time the old order will be completely eradicated and the new order in full sway, and that these things shall take place within the time of the present generation, and that therefore there are millions of people now living on earth who will see them take place, to whom everlasting life will be offered, and who, if they accept it upon the terms offered and obey those terms, will never die. If these facts can be established by competent testimony to the satisfaction of the reasonable mind, then every man should hail it with gladness, every one should be delighted, even though it upsets his preconceived opinions, formed from the study of the creeds and plans of men. We invite the reader, therefore, to examine each point carefully as here made, compare the argument with the scriptures cited, and view the same in the light of present-day events which are discernible to all eyes, and upon all this evidence reach a conclusion. Every man should be persuaded in his own mind, and no man should permit himself to be deterred from examining a question based upon the Bible because a clergyman or anyone else makes the unsupported assertion that it is dangerous or unworthy of consideration. Error always seeks the dark, while truth is always enhanced by the light. Error never desires to be investigated. Light always courts a thorough and complete investigation. Light and truth are synonymous. They are progressive, and the path of the just is as the shining light, that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. Proverbs, chapter 4 verse 18. The psalmist plainly tells us, Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Psalm, chapter 119 verse 105. Gentile times. The term Gentile times as used in the scriptures designates a period of time during which the Gentiles were to govern the peoples of earth. At the death of Jacob, God organized Israel into a nation and dealt with that nation, to the exclusion of all other nations of earth, for a specific time. Time and again they departed from their covenant with Jehovah and he punished them. Time and again be warned them against a punishment of greater duration unless they profited by previous experiences. They had many kings. Some good, some wicked. Zedekiah was the last king, and he became so very wicked that God issued this decree against him, saying, Therefore thus saith the Lord God, because ye have made your iniquity to be remembered, in that your transgressions are discovered, so that in all your doings your sins do appear, because, I say, that ye are come to remembrance, ye shall be taken with the hand. And thou, profane wicked prince of Israel, whose day is come, when iniquity shall have an end, thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem, and take off the crown, this shall not be the same, exalt him that is low, and abase him that is high. I will overturn it, and it shall be no more, until he come whose night it is, and I will give it him. Ezekiel, chapter 21 verse 24 to 27. It is a well-known historical fact that Zedekiah at the time here mentioned was taken prisoner by King Nebuchadnezzar and carried away to Babylon. Afterward the Israelites were permitted to maintain a national existence by other nations exercising a supervisory control of them, and this condition continued until the year AD 73. What happened at the time of the dethronement of Zedekiah was that the crown, or dominion, or ruling authority of the peoples of earth, was taken away from the Jews and permitted to be assumed by the Gentiles. The first universal empire was that of Babylon, followed by Medo-Persia, then by Greece, and later by Rome, and out of the Roman Empire have grown all the Gentile nations of Christendom. As to how long this punishment should be inflicted upon the Jews, and therefore how long God would permit the Gentiles to have the dominion, is fixed by the Scriptures as 7 symbolic times. See Leviticus, chapter 26 verse 18, a time in the Scriptures is used to represent a symbolic year. According to the Jewish method of calculation, a year is 360 days. A day for a year, then, would make each time 360 years in duration. The 7 times would be a period of 20 years, during which the Gentiles should have the lease of power, and at the end of which their lease of power would legally cease to exist. The date of Zedekiah's overthrow and the establishment of Nebuchadnezzar's Gentile dominion, which was the first Gentile world government, is definitely fixed both by secular history and the Scriptures as BC 606. In the year AD 1, 606 years of the whole period had expired. Adding 1914 years to the 606 would make a total of 2520 years, therefore bringing the period of the Gentiles' lease of power or dominion to an end in the year 1914. This date corresponds with the circumstantial evidence proving conclusively when the world would begin to end, that is to say, when the old order would begin to pass away, and fixes the time for the manifestation of messianic power and the bringing in of the new order of things. By way of illustration, if a man purchases a piece of property on which is situated a decayed building and upon which lot he expects shortly to erect a new structure, the first work in which the new owner engages is to clear the lot of the decayed building, preparatory to erecting the new. By analogy, then, if the old order began to pass away in 1914 and Messiah began to exercise his power, preparatory to setting up the kingdom of righteousness, then we should expect that his first work would be the destruction of the old systems of unrighteousness. We here introduce the testimony of a witness whose competency cannot be questioned and whose testimony must be accepted as absolutely true. This witness is Jesus of Nazareth. To Orthodox Jews he was a great teacher amongst the Jews. To Christians he was not only a great teacher, but by them is accepted and recognized as the Son of God, the Redeemer of mankind, the Savior of the world, the King of glory. He testified that the Jews should be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Luke, chapter 21 verse 24, he gave to John the Revelator instruction as to what would take place when that time should arrive and when he, the Messiah, should begin to exercise his kingly power. He pictures the prophets, the mouthpieces of Jehovah, as saying concerning himself, the Messiah, we give thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art, and wast, and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power, and hast reigned exercised regal authority. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come. Revelation, chapter 11 verse 17, 18. Here, then, we definitely see that the Gentile times ended in the fall of 1914. At that time, true to the prophetic statement, the nations did become angry, and God's wrath has been upon the nations since. Every nation under the sun has been growing weaker. End of the world. Fully corroborative of this testimony, we direct attention to the further testimony of Jesus set forth in the 24th chapter of Matthew only a few days before his crucifixion, to wit, in the spring of AD 33, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy presence, and of the end of the world? After giving them warning not to be deceived by other testimony, the Lord plainly answers their question, Nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes, in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Matthew, chapter 24 verse 7, 8. In other words, he stated that a great world war would ensue, in which the nations and kingdoms of the earth should be involved. That great war began exactly on time, at the end of the Gentile times, and there the old order began to pass away. The war, involving nearly all the nations of earth, continued for about 4 years, and its destructiveness of treasure and human life is unparalleled in any other time of man's history. It will be noticed that Jesus said this would be accompanied by famine. Since the coming of the war there has been great distress in the world because of the shortage of food. In many of the countries of Europe thousands have literally starved to death. The food shortage in every country on earth is very apparent, and the cost of living mounts higher and higher. This is not due to the fact that the earth is less productive, nor is it due to the fact of man's inability to plant and produce more, but it is due to the unsettled conditions resulting from the world war, which conditions Jesus clearly foretold would accompany the war, and it is another evidence that 1914 marked the beginning of the end of the world, for Jesus plainly said, These are the beginning of sorrows. Furthermore, it is observed, Jesus said that the war and famine would be accompanied by a pestilence. This has been literally fulfilled. The Spanish influenza swept over the earth, and in less than 12 months the victims from that dread pestilential disease outnumbered 2 to 1 of those who died during the Great World War in 4 years, and now this is being followed in the European countries by the direful pestilence of typhus, against which the people are being warned. Again Jesus said that the war, famine and pestilence would be followed by earthquakes. It was not unusual for Jesus to use symbolic language. In fact, he often used symbolic language or dark sayings to conceal the real meaning until the due time should come. In biblical symbology, earthquake means revolution. Following the war have come famine, pestilence and revolutions in many countries, some bloody and some bloodless. Russia has experienced her revolution, and there the Babylonish systems have fallen. The same thing has occurred in Germany, in Austria and Hungary, and the spirit of revolution is rife everywhere. This does not mean the end of the trouble, but it does mean, according to Jesus' words, that the old world legally ended in 1914 and the process of removing the worn-out systems is now progressing, preparatory to the inauguration of Messiah's kingdom. Corroborative testimony. It will be interesting here to examine a picture that Jehovah caused to be made centuries ago. The prophet Elijah was used as a type of the true followers of Christ Jesus. His journey to Mount Horeb pictures the journey of the true Christians down to the time of the end of the world. The Lord directed him to go forth and stand on the mountain, picturing the church in such a position as to obtain a clear vision of the events about to transpire and transpiring. To Elijah the Lord said, Go forth, and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And, behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountain, symbolically representing kingdoms, and brake in pieces the rock's strong parts thereof before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind, symbolic of war, and after the wind an earthquake, symbolic of revolution, but the Lord was not in the earthquake, and after the earthquake a fire, symbolic of greater troubles, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire a still small voice. 1 Kings, chapter 19 verse 11, 12. In 1898 Pastor Russell, the greatest Bible student of modern times, commenting on the above scripture, said, "The four exhibitions of the Lord, given to Elijah, represent, we believe, four manifestations in which the Lord is about to reveal himself to mankind, the first three of which will prepare men for the final one, in which will come the desired blessing to all the families of the earth. These are: 1. The mighty winds rending the very rocks. Blowing winds seem to be used in Scripture for wars. The wars, whose dark clouds have threatened the civilized world so ominously for the past 30 years, have been miraculously hindered to give opportunity for sealing the Lord's consecrated people in their foreheads, intellectually, with the present truth. We are therefore to expect that when these winds of war shall be let loose, it will mean a cataclysm of warfare which shall divide kingdoms, mountains. Prefigured by the mighty wind shown to Elijah, 1 Kings, chapter 19 verse 11, which rent the rocks. But God's kingdom will not follow the epoch of war, the world will not thus be made ready for the reign of Emmanuel. No, a further lesson will be needed and will be given. It is represented in 2. An earthquake. Throughout the scriptures an earthquake seems always to represent revolution, and it is not unreasonable to expect that an era of general warfare would so arouse the lower class of Europe and so discontent them with their lot, and especially with the conditions which would follow such a war, that revolution would be the next thing in order. Revelation, chapter 16 verse 18, but, severe though those revolutionary experiences will be to the world, they are not sufficient to prepare men to hear the voice of God. It will require, 3. The fire from heaven, an epoch of divine judgments and chastisements upon a maddened but unconverted world, wild in anarchy, as other scriptures show us. The results of their wars, revolutions and anarchy, in the failure of their schemes, will have a humbling effect, and will prepare mankind for God's revelation of himself in 4. The still small voice. Yes, he who spoke to the winds and the waves of the Sea of Galilee will, in due time, speak peace to the peoples. He will speak with authority, commanding the observance of his long-neglected law of love. And whosoever will not hear that prophet shall be cut off from among the people. Acts, chapter 3 verse 23. The finished mystery. Every close observer will witness that this prophecy has been partially fulfilled and is still in course of fulfillment. Israel's double. The Jewish people God used as a typical people. Their law foreshadowed better things to come in the future. Hebrews, chapter 10 verse 1, keeping in mind that prophecy means history written in advance, i.e., that the divine mind foreknew from the beginning the end and caused the salient points to be recorded for the benefit of those living at the times when they should happen. Let us now examine further the testimony of Jesus on this point. He said, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree, when his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh, so likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." Matthew, chapter 24 verse 32, 33, the fig tree here is symbolic of the Jewish nation. We reach that conclusion from what Jesus himself said in cursing the fig tree a few days before he gave utterance to the words above quoted. Matthew, chapter 21 verse 19, 20. Jehovah, through Jeremiah his prophet, foretold to Israel that the climax of their punishment would come when he would drive them out of the land of Palestine into a strange country, where they would have to serve others and be oppressed for the same length of time that he has shown them his favor, the words of the prophet here being, "Therefore will I cast you out of this land into a land that ye know not, neither ye nor your fathers, and there shall ye serve other gods day and night, where I will not show you favor. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, The Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but, the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them, and after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain, and from every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. For mine eyes are upon all their ways, they are not hid from my face, neither is their iniquity hid from mine eyes. And first I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double, because they have defiled my land, they have filled mine inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things. Jeremiah, chapter 16 verse 13-18. Here it is to be seen that God not only foretold driving them out and punishing them, but that he would ultimately bring them back into Palestine, and the length of their punishment would be an exact double a counterpart of duplication of the time during which he has bestowed his favor upon them. First I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double. The word double here means duplication or exact counterpart. If we can get the proper location of these time features, ascertain where the double began, we can very easily determine when God's favor should be due to return to the Jews and what relation that has to the budding of the fig tree, as above stated. God is his own interpreter and will make plain his plan to those who study to understand it. Through the mouth of another prophet he gives us the key to the location of the very day of the beginning of this double. The prophet Zechariah records concerning Jerusalem these words, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, shout, O daughter of Jerusalem, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, he is just, and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt the foal of an ass. Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope, even today do I declare that I will render double unto thee." Zechariah, chapter 9 verse 9, 12. This prophetic statement of the Lord must have a fulfillment at soul time, and it is quite evident that its fulfillment would mark the date from which the double counts. Prophecy fulfilled. On the 10th day of Nisan, AD 33, corresponding practically with our month of April, Jesus of Nazareth rode into Jerusalem upon an ass and offered himself as king to the Jews. Saint Matthew records the incident in the following words, "And when they drew nigh unto Jerusalem, and were come to Bethphage, unto the Mount of Olives, then sent Jesus 2 disciples, saying unto them, Go into the village over against you, and straightway ye shall find an ass tied, and a colt with her, loose them, and bring them unto me. And if any man say aught unto you, ye shall say, The Lord hath need of them, and straightway he will send them." All this was done that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Tell ye the daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek, and sitting upon an ass, and a colt the foal of an ass." And the disciples went, and did as Jesus commanded them, and brought the ass, and the colt, and put on them their clothes, and they set him thereon. And a very great multitude spread their garments in the way, others cut down branches from the trees, and strewed them in the way. And the multitudes that went before, and that followed, cried, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest. Matthew, chapter 21 verse 1-9. Here, then, is a positive statement of the fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy, and the very day of it is fixed, and so the Lord said, Today I declare that I will render the double unto thee. That very day, then, marked the middle point in the history of the Jews. It is exceedingly important, then, to find out how long they had been in God's favor. The death of Jacob, when he called his 12 sons before him and blessed them, is the beginning of the nation of Israel, therefore the date of the beginning of the favor upon Israel. From the death of Jacob until the 10th day of Nisan AD 33 was 1845 years. That is to say, on the 10th day of Nisan AD 33 the double began to count, and from that day Palestine began to disintegrate, the Jewish nation began to melt away, and exactly 40 years from that date Palestine was completely depopulated. In other words, a period of 40 years was occupied by Jehovah from the time he began to execute the double until Palestine was completely depopulated. As evidence of this, we cite the following historical accounts. It may be proper to mention also what things occurred that show the benignity of that all-gracious providence, that had deferred their destruction for 40 years after their crimes against Christ. Eusebius' Ecclesiastical History, on the 15th day of Nisan, that is to say, of April, in the year 73 AD, the first day of the Easter festival, the same day on which, according to tradition, the God of Israel had led his people out of Egyptian bondage into freedom, the last bulwark of Israel's liberty had fallen, and Israel was delivered into bondage. Cornell's History of the People of Israel, Masada attained great importance in the war with the Romans. With the fall of Masada the war came to an end, on the L5th of Nisan, 73. The Jewish Encyclopedia, the capture of Masada, a Jewish fortress on the southwestern shores of the Dead Sea, put a termination to one of the fiercest struggles recorded in history, 73 AD. Morrison's Jews under Roman rule, Judea was not entirely subjugated, for 3 strong fortresses were still in arms, Herodium, Machaerus, and Masada. The heroes agreed to this proposal, of their leader Eleazar, even with enthusiasm, and on the first day of the great feast of the Passover, AD 73, after slaying their own wives and children, they all perished on their own swords. Greetz's History of the Jews, Volume 2, Eleazar accordingly persuaded all his people during that night to kill their wives and children and then themselves, but to burn all their treasures first. The next day the Romans found only 960 dead bodies, whilst but 2 women and 5 children hid themselves in caverns and were discovered. The Easter of the year 73, just 7 years from the beginning of the great movement and 40 years after Christ's crucifixion, saw this end of the whole tragedy. Ewald's History of Israel, Volume 7, the historian Josephus corroborates these dates. Double begins to end. The double began to count, as stated, in the spring of the year AD 33, and since the period of favor had been 1845 years, the period of punishment should likewise be 1845 years. Then adding 1845 years to AD 33 brings us to 1878, and on the latter date, if our calculations be correct, we should find, according to the parallel or double, that sometime during the year 1878 there should be some marked beginning of God's favor returning to the Jew. In other words, here should begin the budding of the symbolic fig tree, which ought to be specially marked 40 years later, viz. in 1918, if this parallel is carried out. Favor begins to return. In the summer of 1878, exactly on time and when we should look for God's favor to return to the Jew, we find there transpired a certain event of the greatest importance that had happened to Jewry in more than 1,800 years. I quote from the Jewish Encyclopedia, which is a recognized authority. Russia, at war with Turkey, was successful, and by the Treaty of San Stefano practically effaced Turkey from Europe. Lord Beaconsfield, a Jew, came into power in 1874. As Premier of Great Britain, Beaconsfield sent the English fleet into the Dardanelles and brought Indian troops to Malta and made a demonstration against Russia. She yielded and agreed to a discussion of the whole affair at Berlin. Accordingly, from June 13 to July 13, 1878, the Berlin Congress was held. Beaconsfield compelled Russia to greatly modify her treaty. Turkey was enfranchised and made independent, but upon condition that civil and religious rights be granted to the Jews. This had an important bearing on the history of the Jews. Other authorities state that Beaconsfield presided at that Congress, wrote the treaty and was the leading factor. As you well know, his real name was Disraeli, a thorough, full-blooded Jew, the first and only Jewish prime minister Great Britain has ever had. From that time on the favor of the Lord began to be shown again to the Jewish people. According to the parallel, we should expect God's favor to increase toward the Jews from 1878, and should have some special climax in the year 1918. Zionism. For many centuries there have been repeated efforts to destroy the Jews, all of which have failed. God never intended that they should be destroyed, and they never shall be destroyed. Their persecutions have held them together as a people and increased their longing desire for a home in the land of their fathers. In dealing with his people, God always raises up a man at the opportune moment, and often the man who proves his faithfulness to the task imposed upon him dies a martyr to the cause. In times past Jehovah has proven his purpose of making the wrath of man to praise him, and every one who has suffered for a righteous cause will in due time receive a reward for his faithfulness to the principles of truth and righteousness. In 1860 there was born in Budapest a Jewish child who grew to manhood's estate. Choosing first the law as a profession, he soon embraced journalism and forged to the front amongst the journalists and writers of the world. His heart was torn and bleeding because of the wicked and unjust persecution of his kinsmen, the Jewish people, which led to the formation in his mind of a scheme for their relief. In 1896 he gave expression to this scheme in his splendid paper, A Jewish State, and there many Jews of the world began to awaken to the fact that their cause had found a champion in this man. When first A Jewish State appeared, his office assistant wept, because he thought the author had lost his mind, but as the import of this paper was considered, it was hailed as a message of deliverance by many of the oppressed Jews of the world. He spent his life in the interest of the cause, and his last words were, "Greet Palestine for me, I have given my life for my people." Today the name Theodor Herzl is a household word amongst the Jews of earth, and the time will come when the peoples of earth, Jew and Gentile, will recognize that Theodor Herzl was raised up at the opportune moment to give birth to Zionism, which is destined to succeed beyond the dreams of its originator. Cause for Zionism. What was the inducing cause for the formation of Zionism? Was it due to the prosperity of the Jews? No, indeed. Let the beloved Herzl answer. The scheme in question, Zionism, included the employment of an existent propelling force. Everything depends on our propelling force. And what is our propelling force? The miseries of the Jews. If we find that God foreknew the condition of misery of the Jews and permitted it to prepare the Jews for the Zionistic movement in order that they might be turned back to their homeland, will not that strengthen faith in the promises of Jehovah concerning what will be the ultimate result? And I will cause them to pass over with thy enemies into a land which thou knowest not, for a fire is kindled in my anger, over you shall it burn. Therefore will I hurl you out of this land into the land of which ye had no knowledge, neither ye nor your fathers, and there shall ye serve other gods by day and by night, so that I will not grant you an favor. Behold, I will send for many fishermen, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them, and after that will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain, and from every hill, and out of the clefts of the rocks. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword, among all the nations whither the Lord will lead thee. Jeremiah, chapter 15 verse 14, 16 verse 13, 16, 24 verse 9, Deuteronomy, chapter 28 verse 37. Development of Zionism. Officially organized in 1897, Zionism has advanced year by year. The first Congress held in Basel, Switzerland, in that year was attended by 206 delegates, only a handful of Jews, whereas today Zionism has its organization in every part of the world where there are Jews, and there are some of them almost everywhere. Large sums of money have been raised and expended in the establishment of many agricultural settlements. Scientific methods have been employed in agriculture. Schools have been established, and the foundation of the great Hebrew University has been laid on the Mount of Olives. The organization of colonies is progressing. Jews are acquiring the land in Palestine and building houses, wastelands are being reclaimed, and gradually the nation is rising. Double fulfilled. When Zionism was organized, among other things, the first Congress declared that its aim was and is the procuring of such government sanctions as are necessary in the achievement of the objects of Zionism. As above noted, the favor of God began to return to the Jews in 1878, and according to the prophetic double foretold by the Lord's prophets, 40 years later, or in 1918, there should be some marked and special manifestation of God's favor toward the Jew. The Jewish year begins in the autumn, therefore November, 1917, would be in fact the beginning of 1918. In 1917 the Allied armies drove back the Turk and took possession of Palestine. On November 2, 1917, or about the second month of the Jewish year 1918, Great Britain officially recognized Zionism, as appears from the following. Foreign Office. November 2, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to, and approved by, the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other county. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour. Within the year 1918, 10 nations of Earth, including Great Britain and the United States, gave official endorsement of the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. It was in the spring of 1918, about the anniversary of the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt, exactly 40 years from the time when the favor began to return to the Jew, that a commission in charge of Dr. Chaim Weizmann, with full authority from the British government, sailed from London to Palestine, clothed with authority looking to the establishment of a Jewish commonwealth in Palestine. Thus we see that the double was fulfilled exactly on time, as God had foretold through the mouth of His prophets. Purpose of Zionism. The First Zionist Congress, convened at the instance of the much-beloved Theodor Herzl, made a clear declaration as to its purpose, and that program has never been altered. The purpose is thus stated. Zionism aims to create a publicly secured, legally assured home for the Jewish people in Palestine. In order to attain this object, the Congress adopts the following means. 1. The promotion of the settlement in Palestine of Jewish agriculturists, handicraftsmen, industrialists, and men following professions. 2. The federation and association of entire Jewry by means of local and general institutions in conformity with the local laws. 3. The strengthening of Jewish sentiment and national consciousness. 4. The procuring of such government sanctions as are necessary for achieving the objects of Zionism. Jews rebuilding Palestine. The Jews are not only laying a foundation of a state in Palestine, but they are putting in operation great schemes for improving the country by means of rapid transit systems, systems of irrigation, the building of houses, establishing of schools, and a great university at Jerusalem, and many other things. We cite a few of these events that have appeared in the public press. Special Bulletin No. 469, issued by the Zionist Organization of New York City, states that the average rainfall in Palestine is 26 inches, and that this water stored up in Palestine would be sufficient to support a population of 15 million people. The present population is 600,000. It further states that from the spring 16 miles south of Jerusalem great quantities of water are flowing into the city. The public press announces gigantic irrigation schemes which, if carried out, will supply all Palestine with an abundance of water for irrigation and other purposes. The Zionist Bulletin, under date of February 25, 1929, says, 1,700,000 eucalyptus and other kinds of forest trees are to be planted on an area of 21,125 dunams. In Merchavia 20,000 eucalyptus trees are to be planted, in connection with the sanitation of the settlement, on 200 dunams. In Kinreth and Dagania 42,000 eucalyptus and other kinds of forest trees are to be planted on 175 dunams on the slopes of the mountain, the farm of Kinreth, the banks of the Jordan and the shores of Lake Kinreth. In Ben Sheman about 70,000 trees are to be planted on 230 dunams. In Huldah 425,000 trees are to be planted on 140 dunams. In Bertobia, Castini, 27,000 trees are to be planted on 380 dunams, apart from those already mentioned above. In the surrounding of the colony of Chedorah 50,000 trees in all, mostly eucalyptus trees, are to be planted on 1,000 dunams. A special bulletin dated March 1, 1920, says, 3,000 school children of Jerusalem, celebrating the Jewish Arbor Day recently, planted 500 trees in the suburbs of the Holy City, inaugurating the afforestation program of the Zionists to plant 1 million trees this year in Palestine, according to a report from the Zionist Commission in Jerusalem. During 1919, 369,000 trees were planted in the effort to restore Palestine's forests, wantonly destroyed by Turkish misrule and by the war. The afforestation of Palestine, because of its importance in the agricultural rejuvenation of the country and in providing lumber for construction work of the future, is considered one of the biggest reconstruction projects that the Zionists are attempting in the Holy Land. Another special bulletin, under date of March 26, 1920, says, for 10 years this struggle was kept up, entirely by Jewish labor. Today this once barren soil is covered with forests of olive and almond trees, 150,000 olive and 10,000 almond trees. Last year 100,000 pounds of almonds were sold, which together with the proceeds obtained from the sale of hides and wool from the extensive raising of cattle and sheep, produced a net profit of 15%, on the original investment. It is of the keenest interest to all thoughtful persons to note that these activities of the Zionists were foretold by God's prophet more than 2,500 years ago, who wrote, I will open on naked mountain peaks rivers, and in the midst of valleys fountains, I will change the wilderness into a pool of water, and the dry land into springs of water. I will place in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, and the myrtle, and the oil tree, I will set in the desert the fir tree, the pine and the box tree together, in order that they may see, and know and take it to heart, and comprehend together, that the hand of the Lord hath done this, and the Holy One of Israel hath created it. Isaiah, chapter 41 verse 18-20, Lezer. They shall build houses. At the Zionist Executive Council held February 16, 1920, at London, Dr. Ruppin in the debate proposed the founding of a large society which should begin to build houses for workers as rapidly as possible. And even now in parts of Palestine houses are rapidly undergoing construction for the benefit of the constant flow of Jewish population returning to the land. Again we find that this is clearly in fulfillment of prophecy written long ago for the purpose of encouraging the Jews to have faith in the promises of the Lord. The houses now built are not in the interest of profiteers, nor will the owners be permitted to oppress those who live in them, but the owners shall live in them as their own homes, as the prophet of the Lord foretold, they shall build houses, and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards, and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build, and another inhabit, they shall not plant, and another eat, for as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. Isaiah, chapter 65 verse 21-23. Thus the testimony definitely establishes the fact that God's favor has returned to the Jew, that the parallel is fulfilled, that the fig tree is putting forth its leaves, according to the promise, all of which Jesus said would take place at the end of the world. Events of Noah's Day. Jesus did not leave us to make a decision upon the happening of one event, but he enumerated several things that would transpire during the period when the world is ending. He stated that as it was in Noah's day, so would it be at the end of the world. As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew, chapter 24 verse 37-39. The first world ended with the flood. 120 years before the flood God instructed Noah to prepare for it, that he might save himself, and to preach to the people concerning the approaching end. In Noah's day the people pursued their usual and customary course of action and were wholly indifferent and oblivious to the fact that the old order of things was about to pass away in a great flood. So likewise today the mass of humanity, pursuing its usual way, is wholly oblivious to and entirely ignorant of the great transition period we are now in. In Noah's day, while he was preaching to the people concerning the coming end of the world, many scoffed at him, jeered him and mocked him, and thereby testified to their ignorance concerning the events that were about to occur. Mark the parallel in events now transpiring. Shortly after the capture of Palestine by the Allied armies, a number of good ministers of the gospel met in London and issued the following manifesto, as appears from a London press report. The following manifesto was recently issued by a number of England's most noted ministers. First, that the present crisis points toward the close of the times of the Gentiles. Second, that the revelation of the Lord may be expected at any moment, when he will be manifested as evidently as to his disciples on the evening of his resurrection. Third, that the completed church will be translated, to be forever with the Lord. Fourth, that Israel will be restored to its own land in unbelief, and he afterward converted by the appearance of Christ on its behalf. Fifth, that all human schemes of reconstruction must be subsidiary to the second coming of our Lord, because all nations will be subject to his rule. Sixth, that under the reign of Christ there will be a further great effusion of the Holy Spirit on all flesh. Seventh, that the truths embodied in this statement are of the utmost practical value in determining Christian character and action with reference to the pressing problems of the hour. This remarkable statement was signed by A.C. Dixon and F.B. Mayer, Baptists, George Campbell Morgan and Alfred Byrd, Congregationalists, William Fuller Gush, Presbyterian, H. Webb Peploe, J. Stuart Holden, Episcopalians, Dinsdale T. Young, Methodist. These are well-known names, and are among the world's greatest preachers. That these eminent men, of different denominations, should feel called upon to issue such a statement is of itself exceedingly significant. It is to be regretted that the ministers above mentioned do not represent the sentiment of the majority of clergymen in the world. To all people who think, it is apparent that there are two classes of ministers in the world, the good and the bad, the honest and the dishonest, the faithful and the unfaithful. This same rule applies to almost any profession. But amongst all the professions of the world, the man who occupies the position of a minister of the gospel is honored above all others from the divine standpoint, because he is supposed to deal with things pertaining to the Word of God. A faithful fulfillment of his commission, then, puts him in the honorable role from God's viewpoint. On the other hand, a man who assumes the title of a minister of the gospel and who yields to the flattery of the world and for this reason disregards the plain teachings of the Bible and leads the people into error is himself a dishonor to the ministry and a menace to the welfare of humanity. No honest minister will take issue with me upon this point. Anyone who insists that this is not true at once puts himself in the category of the bad class. Let each one, then, apply the measuring rod to himself and see which class he is in. And if he sees he is in the wrong one, he will, if he is honest, get into the right class as quickly as possible. An enterprising newspaper man presented a copy of the foregoing manifesto to all the leading clergymen of one of the metropolitan cities of America, and their action is an illustration of how the majority have regarded the matter. Invariably they scoffed at the thoughts therein expressed, and many of them answered, "It is nonsense to talk about the world coming to an end. That event will not happen for 50,000 years or more. This war is like any other war, and these troubles upon earth signify nothing." For more than 40 years Pastor Russell, a faithful, consecrated Christian, proclaimed to the people by word of mouth, through the public press and through his books, that 1914 would mark the end of the Gentile times, that the world would begin to end at that time, and that Messiah's kingdom would shortly follow. A few ministers here and there joined with him in the proclamation, but the majority of them scoffed at him and said all manner of evil against him because of his faithful proclamation of the message. The inspired witness of the Lord corroborated his statement that there would be scoffers at this time who would oppose the testimony divinely provided, saying, "There shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust selfish desires, and saying, Where is the promise proof of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens invisible ruling powers and the earth social order of things, which are now, are kept in store, reserved unto fire destructive trouble against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. 2 Peter, chapter 3 verse 3-7. The clear fulfillment of the above prophetic statement ought to be sufficient to convince any reasonable and thoughtful mind that we are now passing through the transition period from the old to the new order of things. Concerning this same subject, the great Master further said, The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Matthew, chapter 24 verse 29. These dark sayings or symbolic words of Jesus, as shown in the light of other scriptures, mean this: the sun represents the gospel of Jesus Christ and Him crucified, the philosophy of the great ransom sacrifice. The moon pictures or symbolizes the Mosaic law covenant arrangement, which foreshadowed the development of God's plan in both the gospel and millennial ages. And the stars symbolize exalted ones, teachers of the divine word. In fulfillment of this prophecy of the Lord, everybody has witnessed during the past decade a great falling away of clergymen from the plain gospel of Christ Jesus and Him crucified. In November 1917, there assembled in Carnegie Hall, New York, ministers of the Jewish, Protestant and Catholic faiths, to discuss a common basis for action. In all that meeting the name of Jesus as the great Redeemer was not mentioned. There was a decided tendency to unite upon questions relating to civil or political affairs, but the great doctrines of the truth taught by the apostles and prophets became darkened and were ignored. One speaker at that convention said, Here are 3 steps which we may take. 1. The preparation of a book of selections from the Bible by an interdenominational commission appointed by the legislature or by the Board of Regents for use in the schools. 2. The formulation of a plan for non-proselyting cooperation between the schools and the various denominations, to the end that every child may have its democratical and its religious instruction. 3. The granting of regents credits for serious work and Bible study outside of the schools. This plan was enthusiastically adopted. Another speaker, Dr. Finley, at that convention said, as appeared in the public press, the time is come for Protestants, Catholics, Jew and Gentile, to cooperate to the end that every child may have an intimation at least of his moral and religious inheritance. As further evidence, the interchurch world movement has united in action but absolutely ignored the doctrines of the truth. Their statement, which appeared in a bulletin issued in January 1920, says, We believe the time is fully ripe for such unity of action on the part of united Protestantism that, without attempting to solve the problems arising from divergent and conscientiously held points of view on matters of doctrine and policy, the churches are ready for a common program of activity. In other words, they are ignoring the great fundamental truths of Christianity foreshadowed by the typical sacrifices and made certain by the one great sacrifice of Jesus, the selection of the church and through the church the restoration of the world during the reign of Christ, clearly in fulfillment of the Master's words. The stars, here representing the teachers of spiritual things, are pictured as falling, therefore representing that men who have claimed to teach the divine word have fallen to the common level of ordinary world politics. As to the character of the interchurch world movement and showing that the purpose is not in harmony with the divine plan and that it is ignoring the plain purpose of Jesus and the apostles, we quote language recently uttered by some of the leading figures in it. Dr. J. Carnbill White, Associate General Secretary of the movement, according to the public press recently said, to carry out the new program of the cooperative churches it will require 100,000 new employed leaders during the next 5 years. They must be college graduates. An outlay of from $250 million to $300 million will be required to finance this program during 1920, and it is proposed to raise it during the week of April 25 to May 2, 1/3 of the money to be devoted to education, another third to Americanization, and a third to reaching the billion persons in the non-Christian world. The world will be ruled by the forces of Christianity in 20 years. This interchurch world movement is what its name really implies, to wit, the world moving the churches, or the churches moving in the way of the world. The movement is really organized in the interest of big business and political forces. As evidence of this, we cite the following from the Interchurch Bulletin of recent date. George W. Wickersham, formerly United States Attorney General, says in an interview that there is nothing incompatible between Christianity and modern business methods. A leading lay official of the Episcopal Church declares that what the churches need more than anything else is a strong injection of business methods into their management. To the missionary, China owes her expertness in printing, as well as cotton and fruit agriculture. Siam has become proficient in tanning leather through the scientific aid of missionaries. Brazil and India have increased the food production of their soils through the guidance of men of the missions. Japan is richer through the introduction of American fruit trees by the advance of agents of Christianity and progress. Natives of South Africa, formerly unemployed, now earn wages in sugar plantations and in the cultivation of cocoa beans, introduced by missionaries. The Reverend David Carnegie in the Toronto Globe says, "The Church, on this side of the Atlantic, at any rate, has taken sides with the employing and governing classes because of self-interest. She has been disloyal and faithless to the charge committed to her, but, in spite of all, she remains the one great avenue through which all that Christianity stands for is expressed. She alone has the spiritual message for the regeneration of industry. How can the Church discover and use the secret of her power? She has to discover that society and industry are inseparably linked together, that underlying both are fundamental principles of which she is the exponent. Why do men who claim to be ministers of the divine word so dishonor the profession and link hands with big business and politics? The real reason is that they have lost their faith in God and in His word, the Bible. They are seeking prestige and power from human sources and not divine approval. As evidence of this, we quote from the Chicago Herald and Examiner of recent date. Methodist ministers were told yesterday that the theological schools of America are drifting away from the teachings of Christ, and that the Bible is no longer regarded by many preachers as the standard of faith. Dr. Henry Paul Sloan of the New Jersey Annual Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church spoke at the ministers' meeting held at First Church, Clark and Washington Streets, on the course of study required by the Church for every minister. He said 25 annual conferences had sent a petition to the coming General Conference to be held at Des Moines next May, demanding the course be revised. Many Methodist ministers disbelieve some of the fundamental conceptions of Christianity and teach the higher criticism, which is destructive of the foundations of evangelical belief, said the speaker. Occasionally we find a minister of the gospel who has the courage to tell some of his brethren of the ministry the truth concerning the present condition. We quote the Reverend William Allen, as reported by the New York American. One reason why there is so much cause for complaint about poor attendance at most churches is because the Lord is not among us. In too many cases Christ is on the outside seeking to get in, while we are proud of the large sums of money we are able to raise by our great mass movements, acting all the time as if silver and gold could take the place of spiritual power and the grace of God, both of which only come when the Lord is among us. When He is among us, it will be noised abroad that He is in the house, and the world will once more flock to the place where Jesus is. Oh, for a return of the old days, with the Lord in the midst of the assembly of His people, directing and dominating the manifold activities of the Church. It is gratifying to see now and then some Christian paper courageously telling the truth. In an article concerning the interchurch world movement, the Christian leader of Cincinnati editorially says, "Any effort to secure apparent unity in sentiment and organization apart from the doctrine of Christ is wholly unworthy of the endorsement of anyone who professes to acknowledge the sovereignty of our Lord and Savior. Neither the unity for which he so fervently prayed, nor the organization which meets his approval, nor the spirit of his life, can be obtained by rejecting the doctrine of Christ. The spirit and life of the Christ cannot be manifest in the individual or in the organization of individuals unless there first be the doctrine of Christ. All talk therefore about accomplishing a union law spirit and organization without appealing to all to obey the gospel of Christ, is a cheat, a fraud, a deception, a device of Satan to deceive the unwary. It is a conglomerate farcical union for the purpose, chiefly, to bring the Church of Christ into a compromising position and thus break the force of the distinctive gospel which she preaches, or to make her so odious law the sight of all denominationalists for not uniting law the movement that all will shun her. From the Los Angeles Times we quote. In short, religion has decided to adopt the methods of big business and brilliant financial cooperation, whatever its other multitudinous differences may be. Our Christian pastors and masters tell us, vide the advertisements, that business associations, governments and the leaders of the great religious bodies have surveyed world conditions, and their verdicts all agree that nothing but millions can buy salvation for a world torn with war. And they are probably right, since that same world which we are told a great shaft of light has struck, boasts few humble carpenters and fishermen to renounce all worldly comforts, disciples to follow a possessionless master today. Those expensive advertisements teem with ironical truths. The least pretentious business concerns now train their sales forces. Can the churches do less, they demand? In America we must have Sunday school experts, Bible teachers, skilled fishers of men. How very far we have traveled from the simplicity of Jesus, from the Sermon on the Mount, from that sublime doctrine, free and gratis for all who cared to take. The realization of humanity's need for Christ at this time has followed with sudden, blinding brilliance, not unlike that which came to Saul of Tarsus, we are told. But Sauls of Tarsus seem to be peculiarly rare. Rather are they forsaking the ministry on all sides because of the meager worldly reward entailed. Nothing but millions can lure them back, or create new Sauls. Our modern Sauls don't accrue without expert training and the promised reward of high salaries. Every item in those expensive advertisements is quite logical. One cannot take issue with a single assertion. They all rock of efficient promise, of indubitable statements as to conditions and needed reforms. And yet, somehow, they leave us with a feeling of irony that Christianity should have come to such a pass. Perhaps it is the glaring omission of exhortation to our spiritual duty, only our financial duty is emphasized. We are not asked to each and every one of us constitute ourselves a personal missionary without pay. We are not asked to examine the condition of our own souls, our own lives, our own spiritual practices. We are only exhorted to pay for the religious education of others, the religious improvement of others. There are numerous paragraphs beginning, "Your money will," etc., explaining just how much other people's service it will buy. There are paragraphs referring to our duty, but they all appertain to providing the money for other people's duties. In fact, there is a general impression of buying ourselves off from personal duties other than money, and, as the advertisements themselves declare, it were folly to think that money alone could carry Christianity forward. The main problem has always been leaders. We must continue to send out men and women who will carry the Christ life into their businesses, their recreations, and their homes. Send other people out. You seem not necessarily to be those people yourselves. Unless you falter, a generation of trained Christian leaders will make your children bless your name, is another form of exhortation, our faltering strictly taking the form of failing with the shekels. They will raise their 100 millions. But unless most of us take our Christianity more personally and individually, unless we recognize a few other requirements in ourselves besides furnishing the money, our deputed Christianity isn't going to do the world much good, and our financial credit won't cut much ice in heaven. Wall Street with a pious face. Roger W. Babson, statistician-in-chief of Wall Street, in a letter dated January 27, 1920, and given limited circulation, says concerning the churches, the value of our investments depends not on the strength of our banks, but rather upon the strength of our churches. The underpaid preachers of the nation are the men upon whom we really are depending rather than the well-paid lawyers, bankers and brokers. The religion of the community is really the bulwark of our investments. And when we consider that only 15% of the people hold securities of any kind and less than 3% hold enough to pay an income tax, the importance of the churches becomes even more evident. For our own sakes, for our children's sakes, for the nation's sake, let us businessmen get behind the churches and their preachers. Never mind if they are not perfect, never mind if their theology is out of date. This only means that were they efficient they would do very much more. The safety of all we have is due to the churches, even in their present inefficient and inactive state. By all that we hold dear, let us from this very day give more time, money and thought to the churches of our city, for upon these the value of all we own ultimately depends. Again the money changers are operating in the house of the Lord, and again seem appropriate the words of the Master. It is written, "My house is the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." Luke, chapter 19 verse 45, 46. A more honorable way. Of course big business will raise the required money because it thinks this necessary. Do the people wish to trust their spiritual interests with a class of men whose God is gold? Occasionally yet very rarely you will find some denominational minister who sees the subtlety of this movement and who has the courage to speak out. Dr. A.T. Peterson, an Illinois Baptist preacher, says, it is a super league of nations. Dr. Conant, an evangelist, in a published discourse involving the interchurch world movement, says, mergers are the order of the day in every time of human activity, and the latest and most menacing is the interchurch world movement. By this movement the whole Christian church is being unconsciously merged into a great union church which will be headed by liberals, infidels, higher critics, evolutionists, opposers of the interests of both God and man. This movement is shot through and through with fundamental error. Our Lord tells us that the mission of the church is to preach the gospel to every creature, just that and nothing more. But the leaders in this movement tell us that the mission of the church is to establish a civilization, Christian in spirit and in passion, throughout the world. Those two conceptions will not mix any more than oil and water will. And by their social service program they are seeking to capture the functions of the state, and are thus uniting church and state. Gospel as a witness. Jesus further stated as an evidence of the end of the world, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Matthew, chapter 24 verse 14. If the leaders of the interchurch word movement claim that their purpose is the conversion of the world to Christianity, then we say to them that they are too late. They are not doing it the Lord's way. In the first place, they are not preaching the gospel of the kingdom. They frankly state they are ignoring the doctrinal truths of the gospel. In the second place, the preaching of the gospel of the kingdom is not for the purpose of converting the whole world, but for taking out from the world a people for his name. Acts, chapter 15 verse 14, and thirdly, this has already been done and we are at the end of the old order and the new is coming in. Distress and perplexity. The conditions which have arisen in the world since 1914 are distressing and perplexing. All the rulers of earth are perplexed. The financiers are in perplexity, the businessmen are in perplexity, the people are in perplexity, and all are in distress. Why is this so, and what does it mean? Jesus further answered concerning the end of the world, and in proof of it, that there would be upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea restless humanity and the waves organized radical movements roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Luke, chapter 21 verse 25, 26, this is daily in course of fulfillment. As a sample of how the rulers of earth view the matter, President Wilson, in his speech before Congress after the Great War began, said, "These are days of great perplexity, when a great cloud hangs over the greater part of the world. It seems as if great, blind, material forces have been released which had for long been held in leash and restraint. Fear has taken hold of men in all walks of life. Selfishness seems to pervade every line of business. The landlord, feeling that he may not get another such chance to reap a harvest, increases the rent upon his tenant. The groceryman, the dealer in other foodstuffs, clothing, etc., seem to fear that another opportunity will not come and that now advantage must be taken of this opportunity to get all the money possible. The spirit of distrust exists everywhere. All of this is but in fulfillment of the words of Jesus. Man's desire. Amidst all of this trouble, sorrow and distress, there is a longing desire in the hearts of the people, and that desire is for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Almost everyone would prefer to dwell in peace with loved ones and to avoid strife and controversy, but conditions seem to be such that man's difficulties are insurmountable. They cannot do what they would like. Seemingly there is an unseen force or power controlling them. And what is that power? Demons active. Again we refer to the fact that as it was in Noah's day, so shall it be at the end of the world. The scriptures clearly teach that in Noah's day the world had been overrun by fallen angels. As set forth in the 6th chapter of Genesis. These had assumed the forms of men and, in violation of their obligation to Jehovah, had selected wives from amongst the human race, and there resulted an offspring which was wicked to the last degree, and the whole earth was filled with violence. God brought on the deluge. The Apostle Peter, answering as to what became of these demons, said, God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment. Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened in the spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing. 2 Peter, chapter 2 verse 4, 1 Peter, chapter 3 verse 18 to 20, the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Jude, verse 6. These demons, restrained in the atmosphere about the earth, have had power to communicate with the living ones of the human race through the instrumentality of mediums. These matters are fully discussed in my book, Talking with the Dead, and I do not here go into detail. I merely call attention to the fact that the clear inference to be drawn from the above texts is that when the end of the world is reached the demons would have greater power and would exercise that power over men. The Tsar of Russia was constantly in communication with the demons through a medium whom he kept in the royal palace. Emperor William of Germany claimed to have an inner ear and averred that he heard voices from beyond and was guided largely by these. The course of the demons is that of wickedness, and without a doubt the Great World War which started in 1914 was chiefly induced by the influence of these demons. The scriptures tell us of a great whirlwind that will be raised up from the coasts of the earth. See Jeremiah, chapter 23 verse 19, 25 verse 32, 33, 30 verse 23, 24. A whirlwind is a symbol of a great war. The Great War created an interest in Spiritism such as the world has never known, and some of the leading minds of the world have become devotees of it and are proclaiming the spiritualistic doctrine to the confusion of mankind. These demons are otherwise described in the scriptures as the four winds, and Jesus speaking through the Revelator, said, I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree, till we have sealed the servants of our God. Revelation, chapter 7 verse 1-3, these winds, or powers of the air, are not powers of natural air, but are the powers referred to by St. Paul when he speaks of the prince of the power of the air. Ephesians, chapter 2 verse 2, these demons are exercising power over the minds of the people, causing distress, discontent, restlessness, hatred, ill will, malice, strife, and all kinds of controversy and trouble. All of the elements, as the Lord foretold through the Apostle Peter, are thus melting away amidst fervent heat. 2 Peter, chapter 3 verse 10. Remedies human. What remedies do men offer to bring order out of chaos and establish peace and prosperity amongst the people? The financiers desperately struggle to hold the present financial systems in order, but they have no remedy and know of none to bring about a better condition. After centuries of effort, political parties have proved their inadequacy to meet the present conditions and to solve the distressing problems. Economists and statesmen, studying the question diligently, find that they are able to do nothing. And this applies to all political parties and organizations, for the reason that all are composed of selfish, imperfect men, and therefore cannot bring about an ideal condition. League of Nations. With the cessation of hostilities, statesmen representing the leading nations involved met in conference and, giving them credit for the desire to establish peace and prosperity, the result of their deliberations was a covenant known as the League of Nations. This is offered as a remedy for present evils. Will it succeed? A league formed amongst all the nations of earth and based upon the principles of justice and righteousness, and in which all the contracting parties would honestly carry out the purpose expressed, would doubtless result in great good. But where selfishness is the chief motive and controls the action of any or all, an ideal condition could not be attained. God in his wisdom foreknew and foretold the formation of the League of Nations, and he likewise foretold that it must fail. Isaiah, chapter 8 verse 9, 10. The inducing cause for the formation of the League is admittedly fear. Faith in God and his promises is entirely ignored. Because of these facts the League will never accomplish the expressed desire. It is not God's way. He has plainly said, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Isaiah, chapter 55 verse 8, 9, Jehovah's great plan was entirely ignored in the formation of this League of Nations. The prophet truly wrote, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Psalm, chapter 33 verse 12. But a nation that ignores the divine plan, or any league of nations formed which ignores the same, need not expect a desirable result. The Lord's prophet clearly had in mind the formation of the League of Nations, and also the League of Ecclesiastical Systems, when he wrote, "Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces, and give ear, all ye of far countries, gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces, gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught, speak the word, and it shall not stand." Isaiah, chapter 8 verse 9, 10. Ecclesiastical remedy. Ecclesiasticism relates to organized church systems, and particularly to the clergyman or priestly class operating and controlling the same. For a long time the Roman Catholic was practically the only creed extant. In the 16th century there was a great Reformation movement and Protestant ecclesiasticism resulted. The ecclesiastics, therefore, come forward with a proposed remedy for distressed humanity, and since they do so, we are justified in a candid examination of their proposed remedy to see whether or not it is adequate. The ecclesiastical systems, both Catholic and Protestant, claim that their mission is to convert the world, thereby bringing the people into the churches. Let us suppose they could accomplish this expressed purpose and that the whole human race was brought into one or the other of the churches. What, then, is the hope that they hold out to the people? The Catholic creed or teaching is that the destiny of man is fixed at death and that those who are good and faithful Catholics at death pass on to heaven, a condition of endless bliss. All other Catholics who have not been faithful in every particular go to purgatory, there to remain for an indefinite period of time, not less than 1,000 years, during which time they are supposed to be cleansed and purified and made ready for the heavenly realm, that all the others, the heretics, the apostate, etc., must spend their destiny in hellfire, consciously suffering forever. The Protestant teaching generally is that the destiny of every man is eternally fixed at death, the faithful church member passing at death into glory, a condition of bliss in heaven, and all others spending their eternity in conscious torture, eternal in duration. It will be noticed, therefore, that if there be any real difference between these two remedies, the Protestant remedy is the worse of the two, because it offers no middle ground. It is plainly to be seen by anyone that neither the Catholic nor the Protestant creed offers any remedy whatsoever for the present disorder that would lead to peace, prosperity, liberty and happiness and life everlasting on the earth. It follows, then, that if they should succeed in converting most or all of the people to their theories, it would be no solution of the present problems. The great difficulty with the systems ecclesiastical is that they ignore entirely the divine remedy. They ignore the commission given to the Christian and build their hopes upon man-made theories, creeds and institutions. They ignore completely the commission divinely given to everyone who has consecrated himself to do the Lord's will. It will be admitted by both Catholics and Protestants that only a small portion of the earth's population have even pretended to embrace the teachings of their respective systems, and the most sanguine amongst them will never claim that they hope to convert everybody to their way of thinking and bring them into the church organization. The facts are that in modern times they have ignored the doctrines and do not ask the people to believe these but to unite in action, and the chief action is the solicitation and collection of money. Seizing the war spirit, the spirit of the world, these ecclesiastical systems now are engaged in raising millions of dollars, saying to the people, if only we had the money we could convert the world. Is it not apparent to all that this is a reflection on the Lord, that he needs money to carry out his purposes, and is he pleased to use the unconsecrated funds of the worldlings to do his work? Is it necessary to solicit in the name of the Lord money from men who have no interest in the Lord's arrangement but who yield to the importunities of the clergy and pay the money in order that they may have a social or political standing amongst a certain class of people? Could it be said that the Lord must resort to such methods in order to carry out his arrangement? Every reasonable man must say, surely not. And again we are reminded of the Lord's words through the prophet, directing them at those who are advancing these worldly theories, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Isaiah, chapter 55 verse 8, 9. The wise man, then, is he who seeks to know what is the divine remedy and, finding this, seeks to conform himself to it, for nothing else short of divine power can bring order out of the present chaotic condition and bring to man that which he desires. Let us keep in mind that it has ever been the desire of man to enjoy life, liberty and happiness. This was so uppermost in the minds of the forefathers in laying the foundation for the American government that they placed this statement in the fundamental law of the land. The people, therefore, are wasting their money, wasting their time and energy to pursue a will-o'-the-wisp, a man-made theory, in utter disregard of the divine remedy, and, of course, if the people are ignorant of this remedy which the Lord has provided, they cannot pursue it. The great masses are ignorant, and their ignorance is due to the fact that the ecclesiastics have been unfaithful to their commission, have failed to teach the scriptures, but on the contrary have taught man-made theories, and for this reason God, foreknowing that it would be thus, recorded, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord God, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. Amos, chapter 8 verse 11. After many centuries of divine favor, the clergy of the Church nominal as a class has proven unfaithful to the divinely given commission. After 6,000 years of laborious effort to establish an ideal government in the earth, the nations are now face to face with a condition of chaos, and mankind is groping blindly about. The people who love righteousness and truth have been without aid, advice and comfort from those from whom they might expect it and who claim to be the messengers of the Lord. These so-called spiritual advisers have torn off the mask and now boldly declare that they ignore the doctrines and unite in action for money and power. With the great doctrines of Christianity ignored, upon what will the hungry souls feed? Those souls that hunger and thirst for righteousness, from whence will they gather their satisfying portion? Psalm, chapter 107 verse 1-7, is it not time for all such to seek the divine remedy? Man's extremity is God's opportunity. The whole world is being humbled by suffering and sorrow. Let those who mourn be comforted by the great and beneficent arrangement disclosed by His word. Remedy divine. The Holy Scriptures contain the expression of the will of God concerning man. The Bible is the only true source of knowledge upon which man can base a hope for the future. The Apostle Paul, with prophetic vision, looking on down to the time of the blessings that shall come to the human race, wrote to the followers of Jesus, "Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man, the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit, for the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God." 1 Corinthians, chapter 2 verse 9, 10. It was the great Master who said, "Sanctify them through thy truth, thy word is truth." John, chapter 17 verse 17, nothing, then, but an understanding and appreciation of the Word of God can lead man into the right way and unfold to him visions of the blessings that are to come, and the understanding of the divine arrangement brings comfort and joy to the heart. The inspired witness wrote, "Known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world." Acts, chapter 15 verse 18, from the very creation of man to the full consummation of his plan, Jehovah knew everything, and his great program has been working out in a progressive and orderly manner. In order, therefore, for us to appreciate the divine remedy, we must first ascertain the real cause of the present condition of strife, turmoil, trouble, wars, revolution, etc., in the earth. The cause. The first man was created perfect and given a perfect home in Eden, endowed with life as a human being, with happiness, with peace, and with all the blessings incident to a perfect life and a perfect home. He was endowed with the power and authority to produce perfect children and to fill the earth with a perfect race of people. His enjoyment of those blessings eternally depended upon his obedience to the divine law, and his disobedience of that law, he was informed, would lead to the forfeiture of his right to life as a human being, as well as his right to happiness and peace. Man violated the law. This account is briefly set forth in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. Man was sentenced to death, driven out from his perfect home, and the judgment executed by causing him to subsist upon the poisonous elements of the unfinished earth. As long as he existed, he was caused to eat his bread in sorrow. In all these centuries he has been under the bondage of the evil effects of sin, waiting and hoping for liberation. It must be observed that Adam did not lose a home in heaven. He was not offered a home in heaven, but what he did possess was a home on earth, with human life in perfection, as a man, and his violation of the law forfeited these. Therefore, if man is ever restored to his original favors and blessing, it must be to that which he first enjoyed, perfection of life as a human being, a perfect home, and peace and happiness on earth. The disobedience of Adam entailed upon all of his offspring sorrow, sickness, suffering and death. The perfect pair did not bear children while in Eden, but they exercised this function after the condemnation and after man was earning his bread in the unfinished earth. He was gradually undergoing the sentence of death. He was imperfect, and it follows as a logical and reasonable conclusion that he could not produce a perfect race of people. The result was that his offspring were born in a dying condition. And this is what the prophet meant when he wrote, "Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." Psalm, chapter 51 verse 5. This is the same thought expressed by St. Paul when he wrote, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." Romans, chapter 5 verse 12. Redemption promised. Jehovah had in mind from the beginning the redemption of mankind from this condition of suffering and death, and their restoration to that which was lost. Abraham, who lived in the land of the Chaldees, trusted in Jehovah, and God called unto him and made him a promise, saying, "I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Genesis, chapter 12 verse 2, 3. At the time this promise was made, Abraham had no children. He was 75 years of age, his wife had passed the age of childbearing, yet he had faith in God, and when Abraham was 100 years old, his son Isaac was born. When Isaac grew to manhood's estate, God put Abraham to a test of faithfulness to him and directed Abraham to take his son Isaac into a mountain and offer him up as a sacrifice. It grieved Abraham's heart much to do this, but having faith in God he obeyed. Journeying to the mountain, he built an altar, bound Isaac to it, and the knife in his hand was about to strike death to his son when the Lord called unto him out of heaven, saying, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Genesis, chapter 22 verse 12. Thereupon God renewed his promise to Abraham and bound it with his oath, saying, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the sea shore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Genesis, chapter 22 verse 16 to 18. This promise to Abraham has not yet been fulfilled. It must be fulfilled, because God is not slack in any of his promises. He changes not. Malachi, chapter 3 verse 6, clearly, the blessing here intended is life, liberty and happiness, a restoration to the very things Adam had forfeited by reason of his disobedience. All the prophets who thereafter wrote foretold the coming of such times of restoration and blessing. The judgment of condemnation against Adam could never be reversed because that would be equivalent to God denying himself, therefore the judgment must be enforced. But it would be entirely consistent with the divine arrangement for provision to be made for satisfaction of the judgment, thus maintaining the dignity and majesty of the divine law. Hence God made promise through the prophet Hosea, saying, I will ransom them from the power of the grave, I will redeem them from death, O death, I will be thy plagues, O grave, I will be thy destruction. Hosea, chapter 13 verse 14. This provision for the satisfaction of justice and release of mankind from condemnation must come through the voluntary sacrifice of another perfect human. The word ransom means exact corresponding price. A perfect man had sinned and forfeited life, liberty and happiness. This penalty was demanded by the divine law. Hence God could make provision and did make provision that if another perfect man could be found who would voluntarily permit his life, liberty and happiness to be taken from him, all these rights could be substituted for those which Adam had forfeited and thereby lay the foundation or basis upon which Jehovah could restore Adam and his offspring to liberty, happiness and life. Of course, it follows that none of Adam's offspring could meet these divine requirements, for the reason that all are imperfect. Hence the psalmist wrote, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. Psalm, chapter 49 verse 7, what, then, could be done for the redemption of the human race? The Rans Omer. St. John records the fact that the Word or Logos was the beginning of Jehovah's creation, and that he, the Logos, afterward became the active agent in the creation of everything made, and that the Word Logos was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John, chapter 1 verse 14, St. Matthew gives the account of the birth of Jesus, that he was begotten not by man but by the power of Jehovah, therefore he had none of the inherited condemnation of contamination of Adam. The Logos was transferred from the Spirit to the human plane. He became the child Jesus. He was born holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, Hebrews, chapter 7 verse 26, he was without sin. 1 Peter, chapter 1 verse 19, he was born under the law covenant, which covenant fixed the legal majority for priestly purposes at 30 years. Therefore when Jesus attained the years of maturity he was perfect physically, mentally, morally, perfect under the law, the exact counterpart of the perfect man Adam in Eden prior to his disobedience to the divine law. Why had Jehovah permitted his beloved Son to be transferred from the spirit to the human plane? Why had he come to earth at all? Let Jesus himself answer, the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. Matthew, chapter 20 verse 28. And again he said, I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John, chapter 10 verse 10, again, speaking in dark saying or symbolic phrase, he likens himself unto bread, which men eat and live, saying, I am the living bread which came down from heaven, if any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh humanity, which I will give for the life of the world. John, chapter 6 verse 51. The ransom price. To ransom means to purchase, and the ransom price means the exact corresponding price. A perfect man had sinned and lost all. A perfect man now, by voluntarily going into death, would provide the corresponding price for the redemption of mankind. Jesus was not a sinner. He never committed a sin. Why, then, should he die? St. Paul answers, Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures. 1 Corinthians, chapter 15 verse 3, St. John adds, He is the propitiation satisfaction for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. 1 John, chapter 2 verse 2. God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. John, chapter 3 verse 16, 17, Jesus was put to death in the flesh, a man, and was raised from the dead a spirit being, divine in nature. 1 Peter, chapter 3 verse 18, he ascended on high as a divine being, having the right to a perfect human life, now to be given in the place of that which Adam had forfeited, and by this perfect human life and all the rights incident thereto he had provided the ransom or purchase price for the redemption and deliverance of all mankind from death. As surely as God has made this provision, so surely then he will carry it into full force and effect. The seed. It will be noticed that in the promise God made to Abraham he said, In thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Genesis, chapter 28 verse 14. The blessings here promised is life everlasting. Romans, chapter 6 verse 23, it follows, then, that before the blessing of life everlasting and the blessings incident thereto could be extended to mankind through the seed itself must first be developed. The seed according to the promise was the mystery for ages and generations. It is yet a mystery to all except those who have given their hearts to the Lord and diligently sought to understand what constitutes the seed. The Apostle Paul under inspiration defined the seed, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He saith not, and to seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. Galatians, chapter 3 verse 16, the word Christ here means anointed one. The word Messiah means the same thing. The Christ consists of Jesus glorified, the head, and the members of his body, which constitutes the church. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And if ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise. Galatians, chapter 3 verse 27, 29, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. Colossians, chapter 1 verse 18. Selection of body members. Clergymen as a class, particularly of modern times, seem to misconceive entirely the commission of a Christian and the purpose that God has in developing that class. They have conceived the thought and advance it to the people that everybody must join some denominational system in order to be saved, whereas the Scriptures plainly teach that God's purpose and plan, during the time elapsing from the crucifixion of the Lord to the setting up of his kingdom, is to select from amongst men his church. The word church means called out class. It does not mean any denominational system. It means the true followers of the Master who continue faithful unto death. The Apostle Paul speaks of the church when he refers to the church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven. Hebrews, chapter 12 verse 23, he does not say, whose names are written on church books, or who have signed pledges to contribute so much money, not the names of those who are recorded by men, but who are recorded by the Lord in heavenly records, based upon their consecration and faithful service to Him. The divine purpose is clearly set forth. God at the first did visit the Gentiles, to take out of them a people for His name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, after this I will return, and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles, upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth all these things. Acts, chapter 15 verse 14 to 17. In the scriptures a pure virgin is used to symbolize the bride of Christ, the true church, and an unchaste woman, or harlot, is used to symbolize the false system, and the Lord showed that these two would be in development side by side and that the pure virgin class would be persecuted by the unchaste class. The Lord Jesus gave a parable, likening these two classes unto wheat and tares, the true church being designated as wheat, whereas the others are designated as tares. Matthew, chapter 13 verse 24 to 39. He said, let us both grow together until the harvest, and in the lime of harvest I will say to the reapers, gather yet together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. The great apostate systems are binding themselves together in bundles, and the Lord is gathering His true saints unto Himself. Defining this parable, Jesus said, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one, the enemy that sowed them is the devil, the harvest is the end of the world. Matthew, chapter 13 verse 38, 39. Further answering the question as to what would happen at the end of the world, He said He would send forth His messengers with the sound of a trumpet, proclamation of the truth, and they shall gather together His elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven ecclesiastical systems to the other. Matthew, chapter 24 verse 31. For the past 40 years or more the true Christians have been gathering themselves together without regard to creed or denomination, while the denominational systems are binding themselves into great compacts or leagues, and making much fuss about converting the world. A Christian's tribulation. It has become a popular matter to become a member of some church system or to join the interchurch world movement, and the man or woman who contributes the greatest amount of money is the one who receives the greatest honor. On the contrary, it has never been popular to be a true Christian, a true follower of Jesus, and this is due to the fact that the divine program is, we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of God. Acts, chapter 14 verse 22, Jesus said, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross, and follow me. Matthew, chapter 16 verse 24. Jesus consecrated Himself fully to do the Father's will. His footstep followers must do likewise. Jesus suffered indignities and persecution at the hands of the religionists of His time. His followers must have a similar experience. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that ye should follow His steps. 1 Peter, chapter 2 verse 21. Jesus said, the disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple to be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? Matthew, chapter 10 verse 24, 25. Again He said to His followers, if the world hate you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world would love his own, but because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you, if they have kept my saving, they will keep yours also. John, chapter 15 verse 18 to 20, suffering ignominy and persecution at the hands of the nominal religionists and the forces that they can bring to bear, is the course clearly marked out for the true follower of Christ Jesus. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit, that we are the children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. Romans, chapter 8 verse 16, 17, it is a faithful saying, for if we be dead with him, we shall also live with him, if we suffer, we shall also reign with him. 2 Timothy, chapter 2 verse 11, 12. The divine arrangement makes it a condition precedent to entering into glory that the true Christian should be perfected through suffering. The church is but a small number, comparatively speaking, and the church, together with Christ Jesus, the head, is called to the high and exalted position in heaven, constituting the seed of Abraham according to the promise, pictured by the stars mentioned in the promise. Hence, because of this exaltation, God permits them to be put through a period of trying circumstances and sufferings in order that they might be afforded the opportunity of proving their faithful, loyal devotion to him. For it became him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren. Hebrews, chapter 2 verse 10, 11. True to the divine arrangement, the church has been put through a course of suffering. The head and the body members have been unjustly accused of crime time and again. St. Paul tells us, as likewise does the Master, that Satan is the god of this world. 2 Corinthians, chapter 4 verse 4, again we read that the whole world lieth in the wicked one. 1 John, chapter 5 verse 19, the governments of earth, therefore, have been under the dominion of Satan, and the seed of Satan is and has been the instrumentality he has used for the purpose of persecution. In the days of the Master the scribes, Pharisees, and doctors of the law, who claimed to sit in Moses' seat and represent Jehovah, were the ones who led the persecution against the Master. Jesus plainly told these that they were a part of the seed of the serpent, the devil. It would be most reasonable, therefore, to expect that Satan would inject into the minds of his instruments the thought of charging the followers of Jesus with the crime of sedition against his, Satan's, empire. The nominal religionists of his day charged Jesus with the crime of sedition and caused him to be executed on that charge. Saint Stephen, the first martyr to the cause of true Christianity following the Master, was stoned to death after being unjustly convicted upon perjured testimony on the charge of sedition. Saint Paul, because of his faithfulness to the Lord, was confined in prison for 4 years under a similar charge and was otherwise ill-treated. Saint John the Revelator, under a similar charge, was banished to the Isle of Patmos and required to don a prisoner's garb and beat rock. The history of the world shows that the true followers of Jesus have met with opposition and persecution upon all hands and at all times. As an illustration of this fact, the Church Nominal of England became a part of the political power and those who refused to conform to the state church were persecuted. A short distance from London stands a building erected to the memory of men who were burned upon that spot because of their faithfulness to the truth and who refused to conform to man-made theories of religion. John Bunyan, a humble follower of Jesus, refused to be a conformist to man-made theories and he was tried and convicted and placed in prison. A clergyman then was delegated to wait upon him and tell Bunyan words to this effect: "You are going to be kept in prison for 3 months. If at the end of that time you recant and conform yourself to the church state you will be released, otherwise you will be put to death." And Bunyan calmly replied, "You might as well put me to death now, I will never conform." He was kept in prison for 12 years and while there wrote Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, which has been a great comfort and help to Christians who have trod the narrow way from then until now. Speaking of the evidences concerning the end of the world, Jesus furthermore said, "Then shall they deliver you," meaning his followers, "up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." Matthew, chapter 24 verse 9. It is often true that advantage is taken of conditions of war and strife to vent some ill feeling upon others. When the Great World War began, in Germany certain Christians, known as Bible students, who asked to be exempted from combatant military service because of their devotion and faithfulness to the Lord and because of his command to them that they should not kill, were ill-treated, placed in the front ranks of battle, and were amongst the first to fall. In Austria, the very stronghold of one of the great ecclesiastical systems, a number of these same Bible students were killed and others imprisoned during the period of the war. In Canada many were haled into court and summarily tried without being given an opportunity to offer a defense, and were fined or imprisoned, the charge being that they had in their possession Bibles with certain comments, hymn books which they had used for years in the worship of God, and other literature in harmony with the Scriptures. To the astonishment of many people in the United States, there was a wide persecution of conscientious followers of the Master in this land. No Christian permits himself to become embittered because of this unjust treatment, but he recognizes it as a fulfillment of the divine prophecy and one of the evidences given by the Lord to those who yield submissively to the divine arrangement, to assure them that they belong to him. The inspired apostle wrote, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you, but rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that, when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you, on their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified." L. Peter 4 verse 12-14. Jesus and the members of his body thus developed through trial and tribulation according to the divine arrangement will constitute the seed of Abraham, through which seed God will ultimately extend blessings to all the families of the earth. The Apostle Paul, with prophetic vision looking down through the corridors of the age, marking the suffering of mankind and the development of the Christ class, the seed, exclaimed, "The whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now, waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God." Romans, chapter 8 verse 19, 22. Kingdom coming in. The wars, famine, pestilence, distress of nations, etc., upon the earth are but the forerunners of the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. The Lord through his prophet said, "I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come." Haggai, chapter 2 verse 7, and while this great shaking is in progress and monarchs are losing their crowns, aristocratic and autocratic thrones are tumbling to the earth, the words of the prophet ring out clearly in the ears of the followers of Jesus, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Daniel, chapter 2 verse 44. Elijah was a type of the followers of Christ Jesus, and the Lord used him to picture the events transpiring in the end of the world, as we have heretofore mentioned. See pages 19-22, in fulfillment of the antitype, the Elijah class knew that the war was coming, and one of them, the Lord's faithful servant, Pastor Russell, for 40 years pointed out from the prophecies that it would come in 1914. The Lord is not in the war, meaning that the Lord's kingdom is not yet in hill sway. Then follows the earthquake, symbolic of revolution, which has already swept some of the countries. Then shall follow the anarchy, destructive troubles. Anarchy means a disregard of all law, certain classes assuming to exercise power and authority where it is not granted, causing indescribable suffering and sorrow. In this the Lord is not, but it is another means of clearing away the ground preparatory to establishing the kingdom. Then Elijah heard the still small voice. This still small voice is a message from the Lord. The voice is used to symbolize a message or messenger. The Lord has long ago put the message in his word, the Bible, for the benefit of those who should live in this hour of stress. The multitudes of earth are clamoring everywhere. They are confused, they are distressed. They are in sorrow, in tears of bitterness. They are almost at their wits' end. But if they could be heard to express their heart's sincere desire now, without a doubt there would come up from every quarter of the earth this request: "Give us a government of righteousness with a wise ruler who will administer the laws in behalf of all, Give us peace and not war, give us plenty and not profiteers, give us liberty and not license, give us life and not suffering and death. Back from the past comes the sweet small voice of the Lord saying that this request shall be fulfilled, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom, to order it, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Isaiah, chapter 9 verse 6, 7. The Jubilee. An understanding of the Jubilee system which Jehovah inaugurated with Israel throws a great light upon the immediate future events. The scriptures clearly show that Israel, while God dealt with them for more than 18 centuries, was a typical people. Their law was typical, foreshadowing greater and better things to come. The Lord commanded Moses to institute the Sabbath system the year that Israel entered the land of Canaan, which was 1575 years before AD 1, Leviticus, chapter 25 verse 1 to 12, and that every 50th year should be unto them a year of Jubilee. This was done on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. And ye shall hallow the 50th year and proclaim freedom throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possessions, and ye shall return every man unto his family. Other scriptures show that there were to be 70 jubilees kept. Jeremiah, chapter 25 verse 11, 2 Chronicles, chapter 36 verse 17 to 21, a simple calculation of these jubilees brings us to this important fact: 70 jubilees of 50 years each would be a total of 3,500 years. That period of time beginning 1575 before AD 1 of necessity would end in the fall of the year 1925, at which time the type ends and the great antitype must begin. What, then, should we expect to take place? In the type there must be a full restoration, therefore the great antitype must mark the beginning of restoration of all things. The chief thing to be restored is the human race to life, and since other scriptures definitely fix the fact that there will be a resurrection of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and other faithful ones of old, and that these will have the first favor, we may expect 1925 to witness the return of these faithful men of Israel from the condition of death, being resurrected and fully restored to perfect humanity and made the visible, legal representatives of the new order of things on earth. Messiah's kingdom once established, Jesus and his glorified church constituting the great Messiah, shall minister the blessings to the people they have so long desired and hoped for and prayed might come. And when that time comes, there will be peace and not war, as the prophet beautifully states, in the last days it shall come to pass, that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. And many nations shall come, and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken it. Micah, chapter 4 verse 1 to 4. Earthly rulers. As we have heretofore stated, the Great Jubilee cycle is due to begin in 1925. At that time the earthly phase of the kingdom shall be recognized. The Apostle Paul in the 11th chapter of Hebrews names a long list of faithful men who died before the crucifixion of the Lord and before the beginning of the selection of the church. These can never be a part of the heavenly class, they had no heavenly hopes, but God has in store something good for them. They are to be resurrected as perfect men and constitute the princes or rulers in the earth, according to his promise. Psalm, chapter 45 verse 16, Isaiah, chapter 32 verse 1, Matthew, chapter 8 verse 11. Therefore we may confidently expect that 1925 will mark the return of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and the faithful prophets of old, particularly those named by the Apostle in Hebrews chapter 11, to the condition of human perfection. Reconstruction. All the statesmen of the world, all the political economists, all the thoughtful men and women, recognize the fact that the conditions existing prior to the war have passed away and that a new order of things must be put in vogue. All such recognize that this is a period now marking the beginning of reconstruction. The great difficulty is that these men are exercising only human wisdom and have ignored the divine arrangement. We are indeed at the time of reconstruction, the reconstruction not only of a few things, but of all things. The reconstruction will not consist of patching up old and broken down systems and forms and arrangements, but the establishment of a new and righteous one under the great ruler Christ Jesus, the Prince of Peace. The Apostle Peter at Pentecost, speaking under divine inspiration, and referring to that time, said, "Times of refreshing shall come from the presence of the Lord, and he shall send Jesus Christ, which before was preached unto you, whom the heaven must receive retain until the times of restitution of all things, which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began." Acts, chapter 3 verse 19 to 21. Examination of the prophecies from Moses to John discloses the fact that every one of the prophets foretold the time coming for restitution blessings. Reconstruction and restitution mean the same thing, that is to say, the restoration of mankind to the things which were lost. The reward of the church in heaven is not that which man originally had, but is given as a great reward for faithfulness to the Lord under trying conditions and circumstances. Restitution means the blessings that will be given to mankind in general through the divine arrangement and therefore restoring him to life, liberty and happiness on the earth, once enjoyed by the perfect man Adam and which was included in the promise made to Abraham. This blessing comes to the world through the seed, the exalted, elect class, the Messiah, the Christ. The scriptures clearly show that this great time of blessing is immediately preceded by a great time of trouble. This trouble is now on the world. The word Michael used in the following text means who as God, or representing God Christ Jesus, the great captain of our salvation. His second coming and the establishment of his kingdom has been the hope and desire of Christians for centuries past. In referring to this time, then, the prophet Daniel under inspiration wrote, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time, and at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." Daniel, chapter 12 verse 1, 2. Millions will never die. Every part of the divine arrangement must be fulfilled, not one jot or tittle shall pass away unfulfilled. Every portion of the divine promise, therefore, is important. Answering the question as to the conditions prevailing at the end of the world, Jesus quoted the above prophetic statement from the book of Daniel, or used words similar, saying, "Then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened." Matthew, chapter 24 verse 21, 22, thus he shows that the distress upon the earth will end with a time of tribulation such as the world has never known, and that this will be the last. There will never be another. Then he adds that for the sake of the elect those days shall be shortened, and much flesh shall be saved. We ask, why would the Lord carry through this time of trouble a large number of people, sparing them from death in the time of trouble, unless he intended to minister unto them some particular blessing? And since God has promised a blessing of restitution to that which Adam lost, and since these promises point to a beginning of fulfillment immediately following this trouble, and since the promise clearly is that the elect, constituting the seed of Abraham, according to the promise, shall be the instruments through which the blessings shall flow, then this statement of Jesus clearly and conclusively proves that many peoples living on earth at the end of the trouble will be the first ones to be offered the blessings of restoration, which blessings will be offered through the elect, the Messiah. It follows as a matter of course that those accepting the offer as made and rendering themselves in obedience to it shall be restored to that which was lost in Adam, viz., life, liberty and happiness. The prophet of God offers other testimony in corroboration of this, and it shall come to pass, that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, It is my people, and they shall say, The Lord is my God. Zechariah, chapter 13 verse 8, 9, here, then, is a clear statement to the effect that 1 part God will spare in this time of trouble and that these shall ultimately be his people and he will be their God. Having in mind that it was an earthly born, human life and attendant blessings, that Adam lost, and that these are the blessings God promises shall be restored to man, we can understand the words of the prophet David when he wrote, Blessed is he that considereth the poor, the Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him, and keep him alive, and he shall be blessed upon the earth, and thou wilt not deliver him unto the will of his enemies. Psalm, chapter 41 verse 1, 2. Here he plainly states that those who deal righteously in this time of trouble shall be blessed upon the earth. How to live forever? The church systems would have the people believe that only those who become church members can be saved. The Bible never taught any such doctrine. The Lord never organized the nominal systems, and the true church is but a little flock, who shall inherit the kingdom of heaven, and the others of the world to not inherit it. To the church Jesus said, Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Luke, chapter 12 verse 32, Jesus died not only for those who will constitute the members of the church, but for all. St. John plainly stated, He is the propitiation satisfaction for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. 1 John, chapter 2 verse 2. The Apostle Paul, discussing the great Redeemer and his office, said, We see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he by the grace of God should taste death for every man. For it became him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Hebrews, chapter 2 verse 9, 10, thus we see that Jesus died for every man, not only for a few. Again says the Apostle, There is one God, and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself a ransom for all, to be testified in due time. 1 Timothy, chapter 2 verse 5, 6, by this scripture it is clearly seen that in God's due time every creature must hear the testimony as to what Jesus has done for him and know of the plan of salvation. Again says the Apostle Paul, the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Romans, chapter 6 verse 23, there can be no gift without both a giver and a receiver, and this could not operate without knowledge on the part of both. In other words, the giver must intelligently offer the gift to another, and the other must intelligently know of this fact before he can receive it. It would be impossible for the human race, therefore, to accept the gift of life everlasting before it is offered. It will be offered only in God's due time, and the divine plan shows that his due time is after the seed of promise is developed, after the kingdom is set up, and then each one in his order will be brought to a knowledge of the fact that a plan of redemption exists and that the way is open for him to accept the terms of it and live. Knowledge being essential, it precedes the reception of blessings from the Lord, and knowing this fact, it is easy to be seen why the adversary, the devil, and his agencies so diligently strive to prevent the people from knowing the truth. But when Messiah's kingdom is established, we are definitely informed, Revelation, chapter 20 verse 1-4, that Satan will be restrained of his power that he might deceive the nations no more, and then the people shall know the truth and nothing shall hinder them from knowing it. Positive promise. The words of Jesus must be given full force and effect because he spake as never man spake. His speech was with absolute authority. And in God's due time his words must have a fulfillment, and they cannot have a fulfillment until that due time. Jesus plainly said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death. John, chapter 8 verse 51. As above stated, no one could keep the saying of Jesus until he hears it, until he has a knowledge of God's arrangement. Throughout the gospel age none but Christians have had this knowledge, and all who have kept the saying and keep it faithfully until the end will receive life everlasting on the divine plane. Revelation, chapter 2 verse 10, the remainder of mankind have not heard it, therefore could not keep it. They will hear, however, in due time after the establishment of the kingdom. Then it shall come to pass that every one who will keep the saying of the Lord shall never see death. This promise would not have been made by Jesus if he did not intend to carry it into full force and effect in due time. Again he said, Whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. John, chapter 11 verse 26, do we believe the Master's statement? If so, when the time comes for the world to know, then they who believe and, of course, render themselves in obedience to the terms have the absolute and positive statement of Jesus that they shall never die. Based upon the argument heretofore set forth, then, that the old order of things, the old world, is ending and is therefore passing away, and that the new order is coming in, and that 1925 shall mark the resurrection of the faithful worthies of old and the beginning of reconstruction, it is reasonable to conclude that millions of people now on the earth will be still on the earth in 1925. Then, based upon the promises set forth in the divine word, we must reach the positive and indisputable conclusion that millions now living will never die. Of course, it does not mean that everyone will live, for some will refuse to obey the divine law, but those who have been evil and turn again to righteousness and obey righteousness shall live and not die. Of this we have the positive statement of the Lord's prophet, as follows, When the wicked man turneth away from his wickedness that he hath committed, and doeth that which is lawful and right, he shall save his soul alive. Because he considereth, and turneth away from all his transgressions that he hath committed, he shall surely live, he shall not die. Ezekiel, chapter 18 verse 27, 28. Returning youth. The Lord, in the exercise of his loving kindness toward man, has graciously given many illustrations and pictures of the outworkings of his great plan. In the book of Job he gives us a picture of the perfection of man, of his fall, of the redemption by the great ransomer, and then the subsequent restoration. When the times of restoration begin there will doubtless be many men on the earth who will be very old and almost ready for the tomb. But those who learn of the great ransom sacrifice and who accept the ransomer shall return to the days of their youth, they shall be restored to perfection of body and mind and live on the earth forever. We note the words of the prophet. He Jehovah keepeth back his man's soul from the pit, and his life from perishing by the sword. He man is chastened also with pain upon his bed, and the multitude of his bones with strong pain, so that his life abhorreth bread, and his soul dainty meat. His flesh is consumed away, that it cannot be seen, and his bones that were not seen stick out. Yea, his soul draweth near unto the grave, and his life to the destroyers. Thus is given a vivid description of the dying human race, individually and collectively. Then the prophet shows how the message of truth will be brought to him and he will learn of the great ransom sacrifice. Continuing, he says, if there be a messenger one who brings a message of glad tidings with him man, an interpreter one who expounds and makes it clear, one among 1,000 the Lord will provide here and there teachers for the benefit of others, to show unto man his the Lord's uprightness, then be the Lord is gracious unto him man, and saith, deliver him from going down to the pit grave, and the man joyfully says, I have found a ransom. His flesh shall be fresher than a child's, he shall return to the days of his youth. Job, chapter 33 verse 18 to 25. When God expelled Adam from Eden he said, and now, lest he Adam put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. And he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. Genesis, chapter 3 verse 22 to 24. Thus the word shows that had Adam remained in Eden, feeding upon the perfect food it afforded, he would have continued to live. The judgment was executed against him by causing him to feed upon imperfect food. Perfect food, therefore, seems a necessary element to sustain human life everlastingly. When the kingdom of Messiah is inaugurated, the great Messiah will make provision for right food conditions. Thus, when restoration begins, a man of 70 years of age will gradually be restored to a condition of physical health and mental balance. The Lord will teach him how to eat, what to eat, and other habits of life, and above all, the truth, and how to think and how to fix his mind upon holy things. And by the gradual process of restoration he will be lifted up by the great Mediator and restored to the days of his youth and live on the earth forever and never see death. Resurrection. Not only will those living on the earth when restoration begins have the opportunity of life, but all the dead shall be awakened and brought back in their regular order and likewise be given an opportunity for life. It was the great Master who declared, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in the which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice, and shall come forth." John, chapter 5 verse 28, 29, St. Paul plainly says, "There shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust." Acts, chapter 24 verse 15, in his clear, forceful and logical argument set out in 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, St. Paul conclusively proves that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a guarantee that every one of the dead shall be awakened and brought to a knowledge of the truth. Then he says, "He God hath appointed a day, in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead." Acts, chapter 17 verse 31. Thus showing that during the reign of the Messiah every one shall have one fair and impartial opportunity for the blessings of life, liberty and happiness. The brave young men who went to war and died upon the battlefield have not gone to heaven, nor to eternal torture, as the creeds of Christendom would make their loved ones believe. They have not shed their bodies and gone floating about in space, as the spiritists would make men believe. They are dead, waiting for the resurrection, and in due time they shall be brought back to the condition of life and restored to their loved ones and be given a full opportunity to accept the terms of the new order of things and live forever. Many a good mother has spent sleepless nights and wept tears of bitterness because of her loved one that died upon the battlefield. Many a sweetheart, many a father, many a child, has likewise been bowed down in sorrow because of the great suffering that the war, trouble and death entailed upon the people. Clergy's opportunity. What a wonderful opportunity the clergy have had and neglected during the past 5 years of distress. Instead of misleading the people into erroneous ways, where they have found sorrow reigning in the home because of the death of loved ones, because of the loss upon the battlefield of some dear one, what a splendid opportunity to call attention to the precious promises of the Scriptures. For instance, to say to the weeping mother, "Thus saith the Lord. Refrain thy voice from weeping, and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, saith the Lord, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy. And there is hope in thine end, saith the Lord, that thy children shall come again to their own border." Jeremiah, chapter 31 verse 15 to 17, "The land of the enemy is the land of death, because death is the great enemy, and the Lord will call back all who have gone into that condition, and during his reign he will destroy death." 1 Corinthians, chapter 15 verse 25, 26. Appeal to the clergy. It is not my thought to hold up the clergy to ridicule, but rather would I appeal to them that they fulfill their duty and obligation to the people in this hour of distress. I would remind them that the commission given to all followers of Jesus is not to convert the world and bring them into some organized system. Their commission is not to collect money from the people to carry out these purposes. Their commission is not to persecute others. But their divinely given commission is plainly set forth by the Lord in these words, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek, he hath sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified." Isaiah, chapter 61 verse 1-3. Never was there such a time to bind up the broken-hearted, never such a time to comfort those that mourn, as now. Why not tell the people the beautiful, wonderful truths contained in the Bible and thereby enable them to look beyond the distress that afflicts mankind, to the new day that is coming in when life, liberty, happiness and blessings will be offered to all mankind. Great joy coming. It was life, liberty and happiness that Adam possessed and lost. These things Jesus purchased by his own blood. In the time of his reign he will give liberty to all the prisoners in the prison house of death and under the domination of the adversary, as beautifully declared by the prophet, thus establishing full liberty in the earth. "Behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth, I have put my spirit upon him, he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not cry, nor lift up, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench, he shall bring forth judgment unto truth. He shall not fail nor be discouraged, till he have set judgment in the earth, and the isles shall wait for his law. Thus saith God the Lord, he that created the heavens, and stretched them out, he that spread forth the earth, and that which cometh out of it, he that giveth bread unto the people upon it, and spirit to them that walk therein, I the Lord have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thine band, and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, to open the blind eyes, to bring out the prisoners from the prison, and them that alt in darkness out of the prison house." Isaiah, chapter 42 verse 1-7. We have heretofore set forth how the Lord will minister life everlasting to all the obedient ones under his glorious reign. And when these favors are returned it will indeed be a time of happiness, a happiness that will come to stay. God's prophet, looking down to that time, under inspiration of the Holy Spirit, wrote, "The ransomed of the Lord, the whole human race shall return from the condition of bondage to sin and death, and come to Zion the Messiah with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads, they shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away." Isaiah, chapter 35 verse 10. Then the prophet in beautiful phrase pictures how the earth itself shall become a fit habitation for man. The wilderness and the solitary place will blossom as the rose, and streams shall break forth in the desert, the earth will yield its increase, and everything in the earth give praise to God for the fulfillment of his wonderful promises. This is the golden age of which the prophets prophesied and of which the psalmists sang, and it is the privilege of the student of the divine word today, by the eye of faith, to see that we are standing at the very portals of that blessed time. Let us look up and lift up our heads. Deliverance is at the door. Glorious climax. The Messiah, the Christ in glory, will constitute the new invisible ruling power, therefore designated in the scriptures as the new heaven. The righteous government organized in the earth will constitute what the scriptures symbolically speak of as the new earth, the earthly phase of the Lord's kingdom. Saint Peter stated that the faithful ones, according to God's promise, look for such new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. 2 Peter, chapter 3 verse 13. When John the Revelator was serving his sentence on the Isle of Patmos, our Lord showed approval of him and visited him and graciously granted to him a marvelous vision, which is recorded as a part of the Holy Scriptures. With ecstasy that inspired witness of the Lord wrote, "And I saw a new heaven, invisible ruling power, and a new earth, organized society, for the first heaven and the first earth, the old order, were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I John saw the holy city, the kingdom of Messiah, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. Revelation, chapter 21 verse 1-5. No one can gainsay this positive and conclusive promise that under the Messiah's reign death shall be destroyed, and sorrow, sighing and crying shall cease, and that all who are obedient shall be restored to life, liberty and happiness. And since the old order is passing away and the new is coming in, we can with confidence proclaim the glad message that millions now living on the earth will be granted the opportunity for life everlasting, and those who obey shall never die, but shall be restored and live in happiness, joy and peace upon the earth forever. Reader, have you found the foregoing pages of interest? Would you like to have further detailed and corroborative proof establishing beyond a doubt that the war, profiteering, famine, pestilence, the falling away of the clergy and their union with the financial powers and professional politicians to oppress mankind, were long ago foretold in the Bible? If so, at once supply yourself with a copy of The Finished Mystery. The Finished Mystery is the first and only book that has ever made clear the prophecies of Revelation and Ezekiel. It supplies additional detailed and abundant proof that the present unrighteous systems must be shortly supplanted by Messiah's government of righteousness in the earth, in which every honest man is interested. Your personal interest and that of your family demand that you read The Finished Mystery. It is obtainable from the International Bible Students Association, Brooklyn, New York, USA, at the nominal cost of $1. See advertisement on page 126. The full examination of the book. Today, Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe that Jesus died on the cross. But as you have seen in this publication, Joseph Rutherford, the second president of the Watchtower Society, believed that Jesus was crucified. In other words, he died on the cross. The word, crucifixion or crucified, appears 7 times in this publication. In the book, The Way to Paradise, on page 145, we can see the picture of Jesus on the cross. But today the Watchtower has changed this teaching, saying that Jesus died on the stake. The real issue is not whether Jesus died on the cross or on the stake, or a single pole. The real issue is the organization that calls itself Jehovah's sole channel of communication of truth to all mankind on earth changes its truth from year to year. What is truth today will be rejected tomorrow, like the unstable, shifting sand of the wilderness. An online dictionary defines truth as that which is in accord with fact or reality, or fidelity to an original or to a standard or ideal. In what way does each changing of ideas or doctrines in the Watchtower organization makes it accord with fact or reality? If after the change the suitable doctrine is said to be from God, thus making it Jehovah's organization, what was it then before the change of the doctrine? If you are a Jehovah's Witness listening to this is a question for you to consider. On page 94 and 95, Joseph Rutherford correctly stated that Jesus died for all mankind. Quoting the book, he said, Jesus died not only for those who will constitute the members of the church, but for all. St. John plainly stated, he is the propitiation or satisfaction, for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. 1 John, chapter 2 verse 2. End of quotation. Completely contradicting this teaching, the Watchtower of April 1, 1979, on page 31 and paragraph 2 and 3, it went on to say, the quotation reads, in this strict biblical sense Jesus is the mediator only for anointed Christians. The new covenant will terminate with the glorification of the remnant who are today in that covenant mediated by Christ. The great crowd of other sheep that is forming today is not in that new covenant. End of quotation. Again, as already shown, this changes of doctrine cannot come from God because it completely contradict the scriptures which says in 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 5 and 6, "For there is one God, and one mediator between God and men, a man, Christ Jesus, who gave himself a corresponding ransom for all." What about falsely prophesying in God's name that the dead will be resurrected in 1925? For further examination of this publication of this false prophecy, you are now invited to listen to jwfacts.com. 1925, millions now living will never die. In 1918, Rutherford exclaimed in a series of public lectures, "Millions now living will never die." This was related to his prophecy that the resurrection would commence on earth in 1925, with the return of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob to earth. This article provides quotes regarding this failed doctrine of Rutherford, and shows how in recent times the Watchtower dishonestly presents this historical episode. The failure of the 1914 predictions and death of Russell in 1916 left his followers in disarray. After legalistic wrangling, one Rutherford became next president of the Watchtower Society. Credit must go to Rutherford for his ability to rebuild the Watchtower Society. He was able to reignite urgency into the remaining followers by announcing through public discourse in February 1918 that the world has ended, millions now living may never die. In March the title was changed to the more compelling "The world has ended, millions now living will never die." What an exciting message they proclaimed, millions now living will never die. Brother Rutherford had given a discourse on this subject in 1918. It was also the title of a 128-page booklet published in 1920. From 1920 through 1925, that same subject was featured again and again around the world in public meetings in all areas where speakers were available and in upwards of 30 languages. Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, page 425. Reading this brief mention of the booklet in the Proclaimer's book, one could be mistaken for thinking 1925 was of little relevance in the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, yet this was the defining prophecy of Rutherford's leadership. Largely unknown by most Jehovah's Witnesses today, this was the focus of the Watchtower preaching work between 1918 and 1925. Millions now living will never die introduced Rutherford's prediction that the earthly resurrection was to begin in 1925, starting with the faithful men of old, men such as Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Between 1918 and 1925, Watchtower promoted the earthly resurrection would commence in 1925. 70 jubilees of 50 years each would be a total of 3,500 years. That period of time beginning 1575 before AD 1 of necessity would end in the fall of the year 1925, at which time the type ends and the great antitype must begin. What, then, should we expect to take place? The chief thing to be restored is the human race to life, and since other scriptures definitely fix the fact that there will be a resurrection of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and other faithful ones of old, and that these will have the first favor, we may expect 1925 to witness the return of these faithful men of Israel from the condition of death, being resurrected and fully restored to perfect humanity and made the visible, legal representatives of the new order of things on earth. Millions now living will never die, page 88. As we have heretofore stated, the Great Jubilee cycle is due to begin in 1925. At that time the earthly phase of the kingdom shall be recognized. Millions now living will never die, page 89. Hence these faithful men may be expected on earth within the next few years. The Harp of God, page 340. The year 1926 would therefore begin about October 1, 1925. We should, therefore, expect shortly after 1925 to see the awakening of Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Melchizedek, Job, Moses, Samuel, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, John the Baptist, and others mentioned in the 11th chapter of Hebrews. No doubt many boys and girls who read this book will live to see Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Daniel, and those other men of old, come forth in the glory of their better resurrection, perfect in mind and body. It will not take long for Christ to appoint them to their posts of honor and authority as his earthly representatives. The world and all the present conveniences will seem strange to them at first, but they will soon become accustomed to the new methods. They may have some amusing experiences at first, for they never saw telephones, radios, automobiles, electric lights, aeroplanes, steam engines, and many other things so familiar to us. The Way to Paradise, 1925 edition, pages 224, 226 to 227. Expectations for 1925 included: the end of Christendom, the return of earth to a paradise, the resurrection of the dead onto earth, the Zionist teaching of the re-establishment of Palestine. The Way to Paradise described 1925 are the year for God's favor returning to the Jewish people, Jerusalem becoming capital of the world and ancient worthies being awakened. This book goes on to make the following outrageous predictions. The Bible and the Bible in stone. The Pyramid of Giza give the date 1914, for the beginning of the Great Change. History proves that the ouster proceedings began promptly on time. Prophecy indicates that 1925 to 1926 will see the greater part of the ousting completed. All the world's statesmen are dreading the next few years. Page 171. For those who are now living and who will never die. Page 211. When you take up a more advanced study of the Bible, you will find that the year 1925 AD is particularly marked in prophecy. Page 220. 70 times 50 are 3,500. The whole period would therefore have been 3,500 years from the time the Jews entered Canaan until all the types would have been fulfilled. As they entered Canaan 1,575 years before Christ, there would be 1,925 years of types after Christ, or 1925 AD. Page 223. Of course it will take some time to get things in smoothly running order after the great stress between now and 1926. It may be 10 years or more before you get your home all fixed up, and the gardens bringing forth the luscious fruits and appetizing vegetables in abundance. Even if it takes a while longer, you will be that much better prepared. You will have secured the services of the best decorators you can find. Some of them used to be undertakers, but since there are no more people dying, they have had to seek some new occupation. Their experience as undertakers prepared them to become decorators with very little difficulty. Page 228. The Kingdom Ministry October 1920 included an outline on how to introduce the topic of 1925. Good morning. Do you know that millions now living will never die? I mean just what I say, that millions now living are never going to die. The Finished Mystery, the posthumous work of Pastor Russell, tells why there are millions now living who will never die, and if you can keep alive until 1925 you have excellent chances of being one of them. It is an absolute fact, stated in every book of the Bible, foretold by every prophet of the Bible. Kingdom Ministry 1920 October. Rutherford wrote that his chronological predictions were of God himself and 1925 was proclaimed a fixed date beyond doubt. This chronology is not of man, but of God. The addition of more proofs removes it entirely from the realm of chance into that of proven certainty. The chronology of present truth is, not of human origin. Watchtower, 1922. July 1st. Page 217. The date 1925 is even more distinctly indicated by the scriptures because it is fixed by the law God gave to Israel. Viewing the present situation in Europe, one wonders how it will be possible to hold back the explosion much longer, and that even before 1925 the great crisis will be reached and probably past. Watchtower 1922 September 1, page 262. Our thought is, that 1925 is definitely settled by the scriptures. As to Noah, the Christian now has much more upon which to base his faith than Noah had upon which to base his faith in a coming deluge. Watchtower, 1923 April 1, page 106. The year 1925 is a date definitely and clearly marked in scriptures, even more clearly than that of 1914. Watchtower, 1924. July 15, page 211. Could there be any more direct evidence of an organization that promoted false prophecy in the name of God? How could Rutherford say that his followers had more reason to accept his prediction of 1925 than Noah had to believe the words directly spoken by Jehovah? Another quote gloated over the expected failure of those criticizing the 1925 predictions. We cannot be blamed for presenting from the scriptures such evidence as they afford, which leads us to believe that a certain event will take place at a given time. Sometimes the Lord has led his people looking for the right thing at the wrong time, and more frequently they have looked for the wrong things at the right time. But all the enemies of the cause of present truth in the earth are fervently hoping that the Bible students will not be so successful in 1925 in looking for the right thing at the right time as they were in 1914. If they are, however, it will be the other fellow that will have to do the explaining, and not we. The Golden Age, 1924. February 13, page 314. The following quote shows the superstitious nature of Watchtower followers regarding Watchtower publications, and at the time their continued belief in the relevance of the pyramid. There are men about the pyramid who have acted as guides for years. Several of these were sent for and closely questioned. They all agreed that the material was brought there and the construction of the stairway and iron supports began early in July, 1919, and the work was completed about the 1st of October, 1919. Immediately the writer recalled that it was about the 1st of July 1919, that the idea was conceived of publishing the Golden Age, the first issue of which appeared October 1, 1919. The Golden Age announced, and continues to announce, that the establishment of Messiah's kingdom is at hand, that the time of restitution is here, that the old world has ended and the new is beginning, and that millions now living will never die. Watchtower 1920 December 15 page 379. Increase, then decrease. After 1918, the millions teaching became the central focus of the preaching effort, being delivered through a series of public lectures by Rutherford and other brothers. These were advertised in local newspapers, as displayed in the following clippings. Preaching that the earthly resurrection would commence in 1925 resulted in tremendous growth for the Watchtower Society. This resulted in bringing into the sanctuary many more to be members of this remnant consecrated by Jehovah. This was evident from the increasing attendance at the annual celebrations of the Lord's evening meal. 32,661 participating in 1922. 42,000 in 1923. 62,696 in 1924, and 90,434 in 1925. Watchtower, 1960. May 1, page 282. The converse occurred after 1925 came and went without incidents. No figures were reported for 1926 or 1927, but in 1928 were less than half that of 1925, with memorial attendance of only 17,380, and 44,080 average publishers. Jehovah's Witnesses in the Divine Purpose page 313, it is estimated that as many as 75% of publishers left the religion, and by 1935 memorial attendance was still only 63,146. It took until 1940 to once again reach the same number of Watchtower followers as the 1925 era. Shifting blame. It is reprehensible that from the moment Rutherford's prediction proved wrong, and continuing to this day, the governing body shifted the blame for the false expectation away from themselves and onto the members. Question: have the ancient worthies returned? Answer: certainly they have not returned. No one has seen them, and it would be foolish to make such an announcement. It was stated in the Millions book that we might reasonably expect them to return shortly after 1925, but this was merely an expressed opinion. Besides, it is still shortly after 1925. Some anticipated that the work would end in 1925, but the Lord did not state so. The difficulty was that the Friends inflated their imaginations beyond reason, and that when their imaginations burst asunder, they were inclined to throw away everything. Watchtower, 1926. Pages 196, 232. Instead of its being considered a probability, they read into it that it was a certainty. Yearbook, 1975. Page 146. Ever since the 1870s, Bible students had been serving with a date in mind, first 1914, then 1925. Now they realized that they must serve for as long as Jehovah wishes. Watchtower, 1993. November 1, page 12. On the basis of what was said there, many hoped that perhaps the remaining ones of the little flock would receive their heavenly reward by 1925. Though mistaken, they eagerly shared it with others. Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, page 632. Rather than accept responsibility for stumbling followers with their false 1925 teachings, Watchtower derogatively describes these ones as chaff. Although these tests resulted in a sifting and some blew away like chaff when wheat is winnowed, others remained firm. Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, page 633. Current misapplication. The Proclaimers book properly indicates that early Bible students believed the majority of worldly people would survive Armageddon. Bible students understood that people then living, mankind in general, had the opportunity to survive right into the time of restitution, and that they would then be educated in Jehovah's requirements for life. If obedient, they would gradually attain to human perfection. If rebellious, they would, in time, be destroyed forever. Proclaimers, page 163. More often though, the Watchtower misleadingly indicates that the teaching of millions now living was over-optimism and coincides with the current doctrine that only witnesses would be saved as part of the great crowd. In the early 1920s, a featured public talk presented by Jehovah's Witnesses was entitled "Millions Now Living Will Never Die." This may have reflected over-optimism at that time. But today that statement can be made with full confidence. Watchtower, 1997. January 1, page 1. This must be the class of persons that are often described as the millions now living that will never die. Today, it is thrilling actually to see millions of these being marked for preservation, as they put on the true Christian personality, in a dedicated relationship to Jehovah through Christ Jesus. Presented at that time was conclusive proof identifying the great crowd of Revelation 7:9 with the Lord's other sheep of John, chapter 10 verse 16, with the Jehonadab class, with those marked in the forehead for survival, with the millions now living who will never die, and with the sheep. Watchtower, 1985. March 1, page 14. The millions now living will never die slogan applied only to the great crowd of other sheep, mentioned in the scriptures at Revelation 7:9 and John 10:16, whose destiny is an earthly paradise. Watchtower, 1963. May 15, page 294. These statements are complete falsehoods. Rutherford's message was not that a great crowd of millions of witnesses were never to die, it was in fact the very opposite. Rutherford was writing that the few thousand Bible students would die and go to heaven, as either the great crowd or the little flock. At that time, the teaching was that the crowd would go to heaven. The millions that Rutherford was referring, whom would never die, were the rest of humankind alive at that time. Russell had proposed that followers of the Watchtower Society were to go to heaven, whilst most of humanity would survive Armageddon to be educated personally by Jesus in Paradise Earth. He takes mankind as he finds them, and during the millennial age will deal with each individual of the world according to his own particular condition, having mercy upon the weak and requiring more of the stronger. Studies in the Scriptures, the New Creation, page 114. Rutherford continued to promote this teaching. In the new system, freed from the influence of Satan, Jesus would directly teach all people and give them the opportunity to choose if they wished to live forever serving him. Salvation was not contingent on becoming a watchtower follower, or even a believer in Jesus. In fact, the churches were criticized for teaching that their members exclusively would be saved. The church systems would have the people believe that only those who become church members can be saved. The Bible never taught any such doctrine. Jesus died not only for those who will constitute the members of the church, but for all. St. John plainly stated, "He is the propitiation satisfaction for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world." John 2:2. It would be impossible for the human race, therefore, to accept the gift of life everlasting before it is offered. It will be offered only in God's due time, and the divine plan shows that his due time is after the seed of promise is developed, after the kingdom is set up, and then each one in his order will be brought to a knowledge of the fact that a plan of redemption exists and that the way is open for him to accept the terms of it and live. The remainder of mankind could not keep it. They hear, however, in due time after the establishment of the kingdom. Then it shall come to pass that everyone who will keep the saying of the Lord shall never see death. Based upon the argument heretofore set forth, then, that the old order of things, the old world, is ending and is therefore passing away, and that the new order is coming in, and that 1925 shall mark the resurrection of the faithful worthies of old and the beginning of reconstruction, it is reasonable to conclude that millions of people now on the earth will be still on the earth in 1925. Then, based upon the promises set forth in the divine word, we must reach the positive and indisputable conclusion that millions now living will never die. Millions now living will never die, pages 89 to 98. The 1921 book The Harp of God had inscribed on the cover proof conclusive that millions now living will never die. This book went into great detail to explain the generosity of God to save the majority of humankind to be educated in this new system of things. After describing life in a new item with reference to Isaiah 35:4-6, The Harp of God, page 331 said, "When these great miracles begin to be performed in the earth, then the most skeptical, it is to be hoped, will believe that the Lord Jesus reigns." Page 333 goes on to describe God's promise to Noah never again smite every living thing as proof Armageddon will not result in a great human slaughter. The majority of mankind practice unrighteousness, page 334, and these are the ones that will be given the opportunity to learn to practice righteousness during the reign of the Messiah. This was a fair concept that showed God's love and reasonableness towards humankind. Downplayed importance. Proclaimers deceptively claims that the failure of 1925 affected just a small minority, whereas we have seen from Watchtower statistics that over half left the organization. The year 1925 came and went. Some abandoned their hope. But the vast majority of the Bible students remained faithful. Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, page 78. An interesting tactic that downplays the importance is seen in the following quote. "It is admitted that attendance dropped in France and Switzerland, which can misleadingly make it seem other countries were not equally affected. But some of their time calculations and the expectations that they associated with these gave rise to serious disappointments. Following 1925, meeting attendance dropped dramatically in some congregations in France and Switzerland." Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, page 78. Similar intellectual dishonesty can be identified in the 1980 yearbook, which misquotes from the Watchtower of 1926 in an attempt to downplay the sentiment of 1925. Notice how only half a sentence is quoted, with a full stop replacing a semicolon. Indicative of this testing was the question meeting held by Brother Rutherford during the Basel, Switzerland, Assembly, which took place May 1 to 3, 1926. The report on this convention stated, Question, have the ancient worthies returned? Answer, certainly they have not returned. No one has seen them, and it would be foolish to make such an announcement. It was stated in the Millions book that we might reasonably expect them to return shortly after 1925, but this was merely an expressed opinion. Question: have the ancient worthies returned? Answer: certainly they have not returned. No one has seen them, and it would be foolish to make such an announcement. It was stated in the Millions book that we might reasonably expect them to return shortly after 1925, but this was merely an expressed opinion. Besides, it is still shortly after 1925. There is no good reason why we should expect the ancient worthies to return until the church is complete and the work of the church on earth is done. Defining prophecy. The 1925 teaching seems to have originated between 1914 and 1916, possibly from Rutherford, or some other person, whilst Russell was still living, but without his consent. In 1916 the Watchtower quoted a letter asking, "Dearly beloved pastor, a sister recently arrived from, tells us that the class there are teaching that the church must not expect to be glorified until 1925, and that this is your thought." Watchtower, 1916. April 15, reprints. Page 5888. Russell replied, "Our kindest thought must be that they are not giving much heed to its teachings. Otherwise they would know from its columns that we are not looking forward to 1925, nor to any other date." Watchtower, 1916. April 15, reprints. Page 5888. Shortly after Russell's death, Rutherford introduced 1925 as doctrine. This became Rutherford's defining prophecy, as he used it to rebuild Watchtower membership after the failure and disappointment of 1914. However, it was the failure of 1925 and what it led to that resulted in even more important consequences for today. Following his failed 1925 prophecy, Rutherford embarked on a dramatic overhaul of Watchtower doctrine, distancing his followers from Russell. After the failure of 1925, almost all of Russell's time prophecy predictions were discarded by Rutherford. Use of the word Jehovah began to be emphasized. See God's Kingdom of 1,000 Years Has Approached, page 288, Proclaimers, page 152. This led to the name change of Watchtower followers from Bible students to Jehovah's Witnesses. Furthermore, it was stated that between 1918 and 1919 Jesus cleansed the Watchtower Society, in effect implying that the time of Russell was one of uncleanness, and it was under Rutherford that Jesus chose the organization as his sole provision for salvation. Rutherford distanced his followers from other Christians by stating most of Christendom's symbols and holidays were pagan. Finally, the great crowd was moved from heaven to earth, to become the sole survivors of Armageddon. These changes made it simple to introduce a concept of narrow salvation, the concept that only a handful of the world were deserving salvation. Conveniently, survivors now had to belong to one earthly organization, the Watchtower Society. God was prepared to kill billions of people, most that have never even heard of the Watchtower organization. The Bible explains that Jesus' ransom was for all mankind, even the ungodly. Romans, chapter 5 verse 6. For, indeed, Christ, while we were yet weak, died for ungodly men at the appointed time. 2 Corinthians, chapter 5 verse 14. For the love the Christ has compels us, because this is what we have judged, that one man died for all. Rutherford's post-1925 belief structure removed the value of Jesus' sacrifice from all mankind and placed his followers alone amongst the living as worthy of its benefits. This unfortunate view eliminates most of the value of Jesus' sacrifice for those alive at Armageddon and paints a cruel and unjust God. This viewpoint cannot be justified by reason or scripture, yet is common amongst fundamentalist religious groups, due to being an effective way to encourage membership and prevent defection.